A few hoodlums riding motorcycles stopped Michaela and the others at the entrance of the neighborhood. Just by looking at them, Harry could tell that they were up to no good. Although he wasn't sure if Michaela was Harry's real sister yet, it didn't mean that Harry would stand aside and watch when something like this happened. Without any hesitation, Harry quickly walked over. Michaela was stopped by these gangsters, except for the girl beside her who looked very scared. Surprisingly, Michaela didn't have a trace of fear. Instead, she sternly berated, "Hess, don't come and disturb me, get out of the way." There were a total of 5 gangsters blocking the way. The leader was the Hess that Michaela called Hess. Being scolded by Michaela like this, Hess didn't get angry. Instead, he smiled and said, "Michaela, I just want to get close to you and I want you to be my girlfriend. I am very serious." A few of his followers jeered. "Big Hess is very serious. Hurry up and agree to his demands." Michaela frowned and said angrily, "Don't shout so loud. I'm not familiar with you guys. Also, don't talk to me. I want nothing to do with Hess or you morons." As she spoke, she prepared to go around these few people. Hess's thick skin continued to pester. He walked a few steps and stopped Michaela again. "Don't leave. I have been chasing you for so long. I'm head over heels for you, can't you tell?" Michaela said disdainfully. "Don't talk to me. I don't like you. You should go and find someone else to bother." Hess was repeatedly rejected by Michaela and finally lost his patience. He pulled his face down and said, "Michaela, you think you are out of my league so you don't like me." Michaela laughed and said, "You have me all figured out, don't you?" "You have to go out with me to Night World," Hess said angrily. Night World was a disco in the newer side of town. Today was Hess's birthday, and a group of his friends held a birthday party for him at the disco. His friends all had girlfriends. It would be too shameful if he didn't have one at his birthday party. He wanted to bring this beautiful girl to his birthday banquet and receive the worship of his friends. As the leader of the group, the girl beside him had to be the most beautiful girl any of them had ever seen. Of course, the girls his friends were going out with were not close to what Hess wanted. He thought they were all fairly ugly, and he couldn't date someone like that. Michaela was the only girl Hess thought was good-looking and smart enough to be his girlfriend. Now that Michaela was unwilling to leave with him, Hess would be laughed at by his friends. When he came just now, he boasted that he would bring his crush over to let everyone know. "Hess, you toad, you think you can get a girl like that? Are you crazy? How can someone like you be worthy of Michaela?" Michaela's friend suddenly had the courage to mock Hess. Even Michaela looked at her usually timid friend in shock. That girl was actually just putting on a brave face but was scared inside. After saying those few words, she couldn't help but shiver. Ruffians cared about their reputation the most. Furthermore, Hess, who was the boss, was ridiculed by a girl in front of his friends. Immediately, he became angry. He raised his hand and was about to slap the girl. She was so scared that she shrank her neck and closed her eyes. Michaela bravely stood in front of her and shouted at Hess, "Don't you dare hit my friend!" Hess couldn't hit her. He didn't want to hurt Michaela's exceptional face. However, he still said coldly, "Fine, I won't hit her if you come with me." "Huh, dream on," Michaela firmly refused. Running to a messy place in the middle of the night with a hooligan, Michaela wasn't that stupid. Hess was unhappy and didn't have the patience to continue pestering Michaela. His friends were still waiting. It wasn't a problem to drag it out for too long. Hess lost his patience and reached out his hand to grab Michaela's wrist and drag her over. But before his hand touched Michaela, it was suddenly stopped by the other hand. "Don't touch her if you want to live." Harry stood in front of Michaela and said to Hess with a cold face, "Where did you come from? How dare you meddle in my business? You don't want to live anymore, do you?" Hess stared at Harry and said, Harry's sudden appearance made him slightly nervous. He thought he had met a competitor, but when Hess saw Harry's attire clearly, he immediately concluded that Harry was definitely not Michaela's type. He was wearing a ground stall uniform and his accent wasn't local. One look and he could tell that he was a worker from another place. He judged the situation in his heart. Hess was naturally unhappy with Harry's blind interruption. "Get out of here right now or I'll kill you." Michaela looked at Harry, who appeared in front of her again in surprise. She was very confused. This stranger was especially enthusiastic about her today. He wanted to invite her to dinner and stop Hess before he could cause her any harm. "You..." Michaela wanted to say something, but her heart was in a mess, and she couldn't organize her words. Harry smiled at her. "Don't worry, I will solve this problem for you." "Stop shouting. You are a poor loser, and you still want to be a hero and save the damsel in distress. Do you know who I am? I can kill you with just a flick of my finger." Hess looked down on Harry. What he didn't know was that if Harry revealed his true identity, He could scare most of the people here to death. Moreover, if Harry didn't tell them in advance, his subordinates, who had been secretly protecting Harry in the distance, would have rushed over and cut Hess and his brothers into pieces. I'll give you a chance. Don't bother her anymore. I can let bygones be bygones if you leave right now, Harry said unhurriedly. Of course, Hess didn't take Harry's threat seriously. Instead, he was amused by it. In his opinion, Harry trying to scare him away with his empty threats was too childish and ridiculous. The underlings clamored and prepared to make a move. They had long wanted to teach a lesson to someone like Harry, who was obstructing their boss's plans. You should leave quickly. These guys are trouble. You don't want to mess with them. Michaela saw that Harry was alone. She didn't want to see Harry get beat up by Hess and his friends. She tried to persuade Harry to leave as soon as possible. She didn't think that Harry had the ability to solve this problem for her. Although she was very grateful to Harry for his help, she couldn't let Harry get into trouble because of this. It's fine. Just watch. Harry gave Michaela a reassuring smile. Such an indifferent look made Michaela dazed for a moment. She vaguely felt that Harry's smile hid a strong confidence. It was as if Hess, a hoodlum whom people were afraid of, was just an ant that could be easily dealt with in his eyes. Although Hess and the others' identities weren't on the surface, they were very famous. Usually they were also very overbearing. They could easily injure people severely. In this old city, no one wasn't afraid of this group of people. Just like now, the entrance of the district was originally a place where people came and went in an endless stream. While Hess was openly committing evil here, no one who passed by dared to stop him or say a word. After all the people who passed by saw that it was Hess, they either lowered their heads and left immediately, or looked at him curiously and then quickly left. In Michaela's opinion, Harry was just a worker from out of town and didn't know better. He was alone. If he picked a fight with Hess, he would be beaten bloody and forced to leave town. Hess was about to make a move on Harry. Seeing the few hoodlums' unfriendly expressions and their posturing, Harry shook his head slightly at June, who was observing nearby and knew he could take these guys alone. They were just a few hoodlums. With Harry's current strength, he could easily take care of them. There was no need to let June and the others expose their identities. However, Harry's shaking of his head made Hess think that Harry was making fun of them. Immediately, he said furiously, "This loser is really arrogant. Get rid of him." Before Hess could finish his sentence, he was stunned to find Harry's fist getting closer and closer to his eyes. Harry's fist impacted Hess's thick skull, distorting the skin around it as his head was violently thrown back. Then his neck followed the force of the punch and the rest of his body flew with it. Hess flew 2 or 3 meters away from where he stood. Then he fell heavily to the ground. His brain was blank for a long time and he couldn't get up. He had no idea what had happened. Under the heavy blow, his brain had lost the ability to think and recall. The others were also unable to react in time. They were all frozen where they stood. Harry knew where this conversation was going. He didn't want to wait for the fighting to start. Harry decided the best course of action was to be the first to throw a punch. This would set him up for a major advantage. Furthermore, June had told Harry about the ways to deal with the enemy. If one person is fighting against multiple people, it is best to quickly reduce the number of enemies. Harry liked fighting this way. Trying this technique for the first time was surprisingly effective. The lackeys were stunned for a while before they realized that their boss had actually been knocked down by some loser. It wasn't that the lackeys weren't properly trained. Harry was just too fast for anyone to react. So handsome. The girl looked at what just happened, and her eyes suddenly lit up. She didn't expect that Harry would dare to go against Hess. She also didn't expect Harry to be so good at fighting. In an instant, he had knocked Hess to the ground. Michaela looked at Harry with doubt in her heart. Who on earth is this guy? She thought. Hess and his little brothers weren't pretentious people who used the power of the tiger. They were also ruthless people. After they reacted, they looked at each other and attacked Harry at the same time. Harry proved that he wasn't that easy to bully. If they wanted to gain back their reputation and protect themselves in the future, they would have to beat up Harry. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to survive in the old city. Furthermore, the 4 of them had to deal with Harry at the same time. With their tacit understanding from years of group fights, they were confident that they could get rid of Harry immediately. However, the imagination was full, but the reality was bone-chilling. After a few breaths, Hess's underlings also fell to the ground. Michaela and the girl were both dumbfounded. The girl even looked at Harry with admiration in her eyes. She didn't even blink. The surrounding air became quiet. After a long time, Hess and the others got up from the ground. Hess tried to say that he wasn't ready and that Harry got in a lucky shot. He and his friends had been beaten pretty badly. It wasn't worth trying to pretend that Harry got lucky. It was true that the hoodlums wanted their reputation to be intact, but if they said anything, it would only get worse. They were no match for Harry. Hess bared his teeth and stood up, still showing a fierce look. Fine, I have underestimated you. What's your name? He wanted to escape first, and then think of a way to deal with Harry. In Hess's opinion, a lone outsider like Harry was the easiest to deal with. Hess had a lot of friends and thought that it didn't matter now that only 4 or 5 of his friends were fighting. He would just as easily be able to bring 40 or 50 of his friends and make Harry regret he was ever born. Harry sneered and said, "You don't deserve to know my name. If you don't want to fight anymore, get out of here right now." Hess stared at Harry and nodded. "Okay, I will remember your face." Hess would never forget Harry's face. He would return with more of his friends to beat him up. After Hess left with his friends, Harry clapped his hands and quietly indicated to his hidden subordinates that he wasn't injured. Then he said to Michaela, "You're okay now. The problem is solved. You guys should hurry home. It's getting late." Michaela finally reacted and said worriedly, "What about you? What will Hess and the others do if they find you later?" She was worried that Hess would take revenge on Harry. Harry had embarrassed Hess. She thought Harry didn't realize that he had painted a target on his own back. Hess and his friends would definitely not let this matter rest. Furthermore, he had a large number of friends, most of whom were paid muscle. Michaela didn't think that Harry would be able to stop Hess and the others from taking revenge. Harry didn't mind and said with a smile, "It's fine. They are just some hooligans. They will not be a threat to me. Don't worry." Michaela didn't believe him at all. She only felt that Harry was just talking big. She advised, "I think you should leave the city as soon as possible. Don't let Hess and the others find you." Seeing Harry's silent look, Michaela quickly said, "Although we don't know each other, I am still very grateful for your help just now. But for safety reasons, it is best for you to leave the city." Harry said indifferently, "What about you? What happened tonight was because of you, after all. If I ran away, wouldn't Hess just come looking for you?" "I will be fine. The college entrance exams are coming soon. After I finish the exam, I will leave this place. Hess won't be able to find me." Michaela thought about it and said, "How do you plan to avoid Hess before the exam?" Harry asked. Michaela didn't have an answer. After a long silence, Harry smiled. "I'll deal with him for you." Michaela asked in surprise, "What are you talking about? Hess has more than a dozen friends. How can you do it alone?" "I have my own ways. I'm not alone. There are still many people from my hometown I can call." Harry lied without blinking his eyes. "I see, but..." Michaela still felt that the risk was too great. It wasn't because she was worried about herself, but because she was worried about Harry. Michaela couldn't think of any way to solve the problem that Harry had mentioned. It was a game of numbers, and Harry didn't look like the kind of man to have many friends. After all, the conflict that had stirred up tonight couldn't be resolved with just a good talk with someone like Hess. It had to be settled with a fight. Michaela didn't want Harry to take that risk. She racked her brain to try and figure out what Harry could do to get out of this situation. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. It was obviously her problem, but Harry, who she had never met before, was willing to help. Michaela wasn't willing to accept the help of others for no reason, but she couldn't interfere in this matter at all. Harry smiled. "All right, let's do it this way. I should leave too. Goodbye." After saying that, he waved his hand and turned around to leave. Michaela stared blankly at Harry's back, until her friend snapped her fingers in front of Michaela's face. "Stop looking! He's gone!" Only then did Michaela come to her senses. "Let's go back too." The girl was very dissatisfied and said, "He helped and you didn't ask for his name." After saying that, Michaela finally reacted. She had forgotten what to do or what to say. After being helped, she didn't even ask for his name and didn't even properly thank him. The girl sighed and said with a sense of loss, "It's a shame, really. You don't meet a man quite like that anymore. I wonder if I will meet him again in the future." Michaela regretted not asking for Harry's name and number. However, he had already left. Even if she chased after him now, she wouldn't be able to find him. The girl scolded Michaela a few more times and said very excitedly, "That guy was something else, don't you think? I mean, he stood up to Hess for you and paid for your food. He even beat up Hess's friends." Michaela nodded in agreement. The girl's excitement seemed to be unable to get down and continued. "You said that he is a construction worker. How could he be so skilled? Is he some kind of loner that just trains all the time, or maybe he is just naturally gifted?" Michaela glanced at her good friend. You're overthinking it. The girl sighed again. It's such a pity that I didn't give him my contact details. I don't know if I will be able to meet him again in the future. Michaela went downstairs and parted ways with her friend. Placing the bicycle in the corridor of their unit, Michaela looked at the dark corridor and sighed with a heavy heart when she knew no one would hear. She didn't want to come home. She liked to be at school or in her studies working hard to get good grades. Being home meant spending time with her family, which she hated. Arriving in front of the shabby house, she took out her key and opened the door. As expected, the room was still the same as usual. Her little brother was lying on the sofa playing games on his phone. Her mother was watching a boring drama, while her stepfather was on his fifth beer. After seeing Michaela enter, the mother just said without looking up, "Welcome back." His younger brother said with a cold smile, "You always come home so late. I thought you had run away." The thing that Michaela couldn't bear the most was that her stepfather wouldn't stop staring at her. He wouldn't even say anything to her, just a cold stare. This was the reason why Michaela was unwilling to continue living with her family. This wasn't her home at all, and no one cared about her. After placing the snacks that she brought back on the dining table, Michaela began to eat quietly. Her younger brother shouted, "Oh, she actually is eating eggs and sausages. It looks like such a good meal. Quickly tell me where you got the money." Michaela originally didn't want to talk to him, but when she saw her mother looking over, she said, "I earned the money myself. What's wrong with eating something I earned with my own money?" Howie said with disdain, "You earned it yourself? I doubt that." Michaela angrily slammed the table. "Howie, stop being so weird." "Mom, Michaela is bullying me again," Howie shouted. Michaela's mother pulled her face and said to Michaela, "You aren't young anymore. Why are you still fighting like a child with your brother?" Michaela's heart immediately became aggrieved. They were related by blood, but Howie was clearly the favorite. Michaela's mother and stepfather showed no love to her. After a quick meal, Michaela tidied up and returned to her room to revise her homework. It was so late at night after the evening self-study session at school that there was barely any time to do anything before going to bed. However, if Michaela wanted to get a good result, she would have to stay up late studying at home so she could get grants and scholarships to a good college. That was why she had to put in more effort than others. However, tonight Michaela's mind was entangled with all kinds of complicated emotions. She couldn't calm down and couldn't study no matter how hard she tried. In the end, she gave up dejectedly and threw herself onto the bed, not moving at all. A voice came from the living room outside. "Mom, Michaela staying at home is too much of a hindrance. We should arrange for her to get married. Then we can ask for a betrothal gift and have men bid for her hand. We can make a lot of money." Michaela immediately gritted her teeth. Michaela's mother reprimanded, "What nonsense are you talking about? How old is your sister? She isn't that old." "Mom, you don't understand. She is young and about to go off on her own at college. If we don't do anything now and have her promised to someone before she turns 18, then we won't get any money," Howie said. When her stepfather heard the word money, his eyes lit up. He couldn't help but say, "It's true. Many families overseas do it this way. More importantly, a lot of rich families do it this way. We could make a lot of money off of this." Michaela's stepfather didn't have a proper job. He usually stayed at home and drank or went out with a few of his friends that would give him money from time to time. Occasionally, he would take that money and gamble it. If he lost money, he would go home and ask Michaela's mother for money. He was a horrid man. When he heard that he could earn a large sum of money from the betrothal gifts, his heart began to stir. He'd read articles in magazines that said betrothal gifts averaged $800,000. He thought that Michaela would fetch a higher price because of her natural beauty. Howie saw that his father also agreed and became even more excited. He said, "Right? I think it might be best if we can find her a man before she goes off to college." Michaela almost exploded in anger when she heard this in the room. "I'm not an object you can sell." She wanted to rush out and kill Howie, but after thinking about it, Michaela gave up. She wasn't popular in this family to begin with. Her stepfather was a mean drunk. Michaela didn't dare to stay at home alone with him. Howie didn't treat her as his older sister at all. He just wanted to scream at her or chase her out of the house. Her mother doted on the younger brother more than her by 1,000 times. Michaela felt that her mother had blamed her for all of her own mistakes. Her mother hadn't loved her for years. To be able to grow up in this kind of family environment, Michaela felt that she was already strong enough to live on her own. She endured until now, and finally waited for the opportunity. As long as she participated in the college entrance examination, She would be able to enter a university that could give her scholarships to attend. She would run away from this family and get out of this environment that had always rejected her. That's true. After going to university, no one will care anymore. His mother actually agreed. Howie tried to cheer her up. That's right. I heard that universities are in chaos now. Well, if that's the case, Michaela might as well not go to college. It's useless for a girl like her to have a college degree. Sooner or later, she will have to marry someone and have children. It's better to go to work after graduating from high school. Hearing what his mother said, Michaela couldn't stop her tears from flowing. She really didn't think that her only hope would be rejected by her mother just like that. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She got up and opened the door. She shouted in the living room, "I want to go to college. Even if I have to die, I still want to go to college. Don't think of stopping me." After shouting, she slammed the door shut and threw herself onto the bed, covering her head with a pillow and crying. The few people in the living room looked at each other for a while. Howie said, "Where will you get the money for you to go to university? We have to save for me to go to school." His stepfather nodded. "Yes, we have to save money for Howie's tuition. It will not be cheap for him to go to high school next year. It will cost a lot of money." Harry didn't know what had happened to Michaela when she returned home. He was standing at the door of a disco and listening to his subordinate's report. "Sir, those gangsters from earlier are at the club. There are 50 people inside and they are having a meeting." The reason why Harry chased after them was to learn more about his new opponent. If he let them go today, he would still be entangled by these punks in the future. Harry came here to confirm Michaela's identity. He didn't have the time to pester the punks. "Take these people to the basketball court out front," Harry ordered. "Yes, sir." Over 100 Wolfguard people rushed into the disco. The security guards at the entrance of the disco were so scared that they almost peed their pants. They didn't even dare to stop them and just hid in the corner of the wall. In the disco, Hess's face had been gloomy ever since he came back. When the underlings who were waiting for him to bring the girl back saw this scene, they knew that they must have been defeated. Hess usually bragged about how beautiful his girl was, but today he didn't even bring her back after going out for a trip. This was a complete disgrace in front of his underlings. There was actually someone who didn't open his eyes and went forward to ask, "Boss, why didn't that girl come with you?" Those who went with Hess quickly gave him a look, but it was too late. Hess picked up an unopened beer bottle and smashed it on the head of this little man who didn't have any eyes. "You are mocking me on purpose, right?" The beer bottle shattered into pieces. The glass and beer spread along the floor and a few women screamed at the sound. The man who he hit fell to the ground unconscious. When the surrounding people saw Hess beating people up without saying a word, they all kept quiet out of fear, and no one dared to make a sound. The security guards in the disco also acted as if they hadn't seen anything. They knew Hess was a regular and brought a lot of people out to drink. They knew that kicking him out would be death for the disco. It wasn't uncommon for him to fight. As long as he didn't cause too much trouble, no one would care about him. Even if he wanted to, he didn't have the guts. Furthermore, this was Hess teaching his subordinates a lesson, so no one would dare to stand up for him. Furthermore, Hess had some connections with the disco owner, so he was in charge of the place for the owner. Therefore, people would just pretend that they didn't see such a thing. After kicking the unconscious man to the side, Hess picked up a bottle of wine and gulped it down. The anger in his heart didn't dissipate, and he smashed the bottle onto the ground. "I have to take revenge today. Let's go get this guy that humiliated me." Hess didn't want to drag out his anger. He knew that Harry was a construction worker. He had suffered a loss at Harry's hands tonight. If he didn't get revenge immediately, he wouldn't be able to sleep. He was also worried that they wouldn't find Harry if he ran away, so he decided to take everyone with him and find Harry before he went too far. Hess was the local tyrant in the old city. It was very easy for him to find people when he wanted. The group of friends looked at each other, not knowing what was going on. Originally, everyone was happily drinking wine. Then their boss came and beat one of them unconscious. Now he wanted to go out and fight. Most of the men didn't want to, but they said nothing and would do what Hess said. A few of Hess's friends who had returned with him. They quietly explained to the others what had happened just now. Only now did everyone understand. It turned out that the boss had been beaten up by someone earlier. This wasn't good. He had to go out and teach the man that beat him up a lesson. The group of underlings suddenly became indignant. They stopped drinking and stood up one after another, ready to go out and look for Harry's misfortune. At this moment, the Wolf Guard rushed in from the entrance of the disco. The group of over 100 people standing in front of them was very frightening. The Wolf Guard had one goal. They were tasked with making sure Hess couldn't do anything to Harry. One member from the Wolf Guard would be enough, but having so many intimidate the hooligans would avoid bloodshed. They also wanted to catch all of them in one fell swoop to prevent anyone from escaping during the chaos. Hess was with his group of hoodlums. Usually they were overbearing, but that was for honest people. At most, they were just brave and willing to fight for any reason. When faced with the elites of the Wolf Guard, they were nothing. There were many people from the Wolf Guard who came in, but their actions were very orderly. More than 20 people blocked the exit, and more than 20 people blocked the back door. The rest of them surrounded Hess and his group, staring at them. At first, Hess didn't know what these people were here for, but he still wanted to ask them. However, when the entire disco hall was surrounded and he saw the extraordinary auras of these people, Hess's heart began to pound. The manager of the disco ran out, trembling as he came in front of the leader of the Wolf Guard. He carefully asked, "Everyone, what is this?" "It has nothing to do with you. Move aside. Hess, come here." "Me?" Hess was stunned. The people of Wolfguard saw that Hess didn't dare to go forward. The captain waved his hand and the two of them walked towards Hess. "Hey, what are you doing? Stop right there. If you come any closer, I'll kick your teeth in." Hess's underlings didn't want to weaken their imposing manner anymore. They immediately stopped him, waving their hands and making threatening gestures. The Wolfguard didn't care, so they immediately kicked these two men away. "Let's attack together." Hess saw that his friend had been beaten up, so of course he couldn't just stand there and watch. He howled and started fighting with his friends. Unfortunately, reality gave him another cold blow. Before the group of people could even make a move, they were all knocked down to the ground by the Wolf Guard. More than 50 gangsters were beaten in the blink of an eye. It was so fast that the rest of the people in the disco had no time to react. They saw Hess and his group, who were usually arrogant and loud, being dragged away like dead dogs. "You are the manager of this disco?" the leader of the Wolf Guard asked coldly. "I am," a short man said. "Are you familiar with Hess?" "I'm not familiar with him, no." The disco manager didn't dare to tell the truth. One look at the situation today and one could tell that Hess had offended someone with a lot of money and power. He was so scared that he quickly denied it. The captain said unhappily, "Answer me honestly. Does Hess have any other subordinates?" No, you got them all," the short manager said meekly. "Very good. You guys can continue your fun." The captain suddenly became amiable, patted the manager's shoulder, and led everyone out of the disco. Even after all the Wolf Guard members had left for quite a while, the manager still stood there without moving. A few waiters walked up and asked with concern, "Manager, what's wrong with you?" The disco manager waved his hand and said with a sullen face, "It's nothing, it's fine. You guys go and do your own things." Everyone looked at his legs, which were clearly still trembling, and understood in their hearts that he was so scared that his legs had gone soft. However, no one laughed at the manager. There was no one who wasn't afraid of the fight earlier. At this moment, the noisy music in the disco had already been turned off. No one wanted to turn it on again. They were all discussing what had just happened when a large group of fierce people suddenly appeared and dragged Hess and his group out of the disco forcefully. There was no one who wasn't curious about such a big matter. Hess was an influential figure in the old city. It was really strange that he was beaten up so easily. "I was scared to death just now. Who are those people?" said a tall girl. "How would I know?" said her boyfriend. "I'll go to the door to take a look. You'll never guess what's going on outside," said a short man. "Hurry up and say it," the girl asked. "It's even scarier outside. There are more than 100 people. All their luxury cars are blocked on the street outside. Hess and the others were taken to different cars. I don't know where they are going," the short man said. The customers in the disco were in groups of 3 to 5, discussing incessantly. They were all curious about what exactly was going on. In a remote outdoor basketball court, Hess had already been brought over by the people of Wolfguard. It was already midnight, and there was no one around. However, under the dim light, the side of the basketball court was filled with frightening people from the Wolfguard. All of them were silent like statues. The only movement was that there was a figure leisurely playing basketball on the basketball court. The sound of the basketball hitting the ground and the rebound was like the sound of a drum. The rhythmic sound caused Hess's heart to beat wildly. He didn't understand why he had provoked this group of evil-looking men. However, When Harry turned around and walked towards the light, Hess suddenly lost his voice and said, "It's you?" He was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out. He had never thought that it would be Harry, who had taught him a lesson at the entrance of the neighborhood. Hess was going to seek revenge on Harry. He never would have thought Harry would find him first. Moreover, he had unexpectedly brought along so many people who looked like they weren't to be trifled with. Hess was dumbfounded as he looked at Harry. He was still wearing the familiar street clothes. He couldn't understand it no matter how hard he tried. Wasn't he a poor worker? Why were there so many people respectfully waiting for him to play basketball? Hess thought. Who are you exactly? Hess could no longer suppress the doubt in his heart. Boss, what is going on? We didn't provoke these people, did we? His friends who were surrounded by the Wolf Guard were also frightened. Kneel down. Be obedient. The Wolf Guard immediately kicked this group of hoodlums to the ground and faced Harry. Hess and the others didn't dare to resist. Even if they were to kneel in such a humiliating manner, they wouldn't have the slightest intention of resisting. This was because not only did the Wolf Guard have the absolute advantage in numbers, but they also all revealed their weapons. Harry patted the basketball as he walked towards Hess. He said unhurriedly, "Didn't you just say that you still wanted to teach me a lesson? I'm here. What's my lesson? Just who are you?" Hess was about to cry. He wanted to teach Harry a lesson, but that was under the premise that Harry was only a construction worker. Although Harry was wearing cheap clothing, the aura that he erupted at this moment made Hess feel a little choked for air. This is obviously not an ordinary person, Hess thought. Hess still wanted to take revenge on Harry. You don't deserve to know my identity. Harry still said the same thing. Then what do you want? Harry smiled. I want to kill you. As soon as the words left his mouth, Hess almost stopped breathing. He was so scared that his soul almost flew out of his body. Ha, I've killed better men than you, Harry said with a smile. Right. You'll kill me. Hess nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Harry threw the basketball in his hand directly at Hess's face. His expression became cold as he said, Tell me, what is the purpose of getting close to Michaela? Why were you pestering her tonight? Ah? Hess was confused by the question. Look, man, if you want her, you can have her. Hess saw Harry's murderous expression and quickly replied, Do you really think I'm that naive? Harry's question made Hess almost cry. He didn't know why Harry didn't believe him when he told the truth, and he also didn't think that Michaela would attract such a terrifying disaster. The reason why Harry doubted Hess was because what happened today was too coincidental. He came to find out whether Michaela was his sister or not, and in the end he ran into Hess, who got involved and caused the incident at the entrance of the community. Such a coincidence couldn't help but make Harry suspect that this was a play played by Hess. If Michaela was a fake, she might have found out that Harry had come. That was why she had put on a show just now, which had aroused Harry's relationship with his family. If that was the case, Harry's impression of Michaela would be that she was a weakling who needed protection. Naturally, he would relax his guard a little. Hess spoke the truth, but Harry was still skeptical. He waved his hand at the Wolf Guard, and Hess was brought to a small forest nearby for interrogation. Harry carried the basketball and sat on the resting chair next to the court. Sir, do you think there will be a problem with these people? June asked. What do you think? Harry asked back. June shook her head. In my opinion, these people aren't that coordinated. They are just a bunch of gangsters who aren't worth our time. Even so, it would be best to know for sure. Harry looked serious. Regarding Michaela's question, Harry was more cautious than anyone else. He had to know if he had a sister. If it was true, then Harry naturally had to arrange the best life for Michaela. But if she wasn't his sister, he wouldn't have wasted his time in vain. He had to know before he got attached to Michaela if she were really after his fortune and not part of his family. Harry had to take advantage of the fact that they hadn't met yet to find the truth and destroy all schemes and plots before they complete. Therefore, while watching Michaela, anyone who appeared in front of him was someone Harry needed to suspect. Hess was the first character that Harry encountered after coming here. Of course, Harry wanted to know whether this was his idea or not. Even if Hess acted like a real person and kept his mouth shut, under the torture of Wolfguard, he would still tell the truth sooner or later. Sir, there is no need to go through so much trouble, June suddenly said. Do you have any better ideas? Harry asked. Michaela is about to take the college entrance examination, right? According to the rules, she usually needs to undergo a physical examination before the college entrance examination. We can use this opportunity to disguise ourselves as doctors for the physical examination. It is very easy to collect some of Michaela's blood or hair tissue, June said. Harry laughed and said, "Why didn't you say so earlier?" "I just thought of it." "Okay, then let's go with that idea. Organize a physical examination in Michaela's school. After you collect Michaela's blood, don't give it to other people to do genetic tests. Hand it to the doctor yourself." "I will begin preparations for the examination tomorrow." Harry nodded and said worriedly, "I will personally watch the testing process." "Sir, you are too cautious," June couldn't help but say. "If I don't see the results for myself, I'll never get a good night's sleep," Harry said faintly. The next morning, the high school campus was filled with the thick scent of books, and the atmosphere in the high school class was as stressful as it could be during the end of the semester. However, it still couldn't conceal the youthful atmosphere that was overflowing everywhere. Michaela was currently studying in her third year at Mountain City High School. In the morning, the teacher had already come to inform everyone that they would gather at the administrative building after the lunch break and wait for their physical examinations. In high school, physical examinations were required for all students. It happens every year, so no one was surprised. A lot of the students were happy to do the examinations. The older students got a break from studying in classes to sit around and chat with their friends while they waited their turn. After lunch, they rested at the desk in the classroom in the morning, and it was time for the physical examinations to start. Classes would be examined one at a time and would go in descending order. Class 1 was first, Class 2 was second, and so on. When it was Michaela's turn in Class 4, her classmate, her friend, started to get nervous. "Michaela, what should we do? I'm afraid of needles," Hannah said nervously. Michaela made a helpless gesture. "Then what should we do? They do it every year. It can't be an exception just because you are afraid, right?" "But it really hurts, and it's very scary. Last year, the nurse stabbed me like 10 times and couldn't find my veins to save his life. My arm was bruised for weeks. It hurt the whole time." She hugged her arm and recalled the past. Michaela smiled and said, "It's your own fault for being so cute. No wonder they couldn't find your vein." Michaela was teasing her friend. She knew that some people had veins that were deep under their skin and would move easily. But what Michaela said also made sense. Hannah was too chubby. Hannah was very confused. "I can't help it's my genetics. What can I do?" As they chatted and laughed, they followed the people in the class to the physical examination place. No one knew that the staff responsible for the physical examination for the 3 classes had changed after Michaela's class came. June brought a few disguised Wolf Guard staff members and put on a white coat at this moment, disguised as a physical examination doctor. For others, it was very difficult to disguise themselves, but for June, it was no problem. It wasn't complicated at all to bribe some of the middle and executives of the physical examination institution to give them temporary identities. Harry, on the other hand, also sneaked in because he was worried. As an assistant, he sat beside June. When they drew Michaela's blood, she didn't notice that Harry was sitting next to her. At this moment, Harry was wearing white clothes and a mask. His hairstyle had been especially changed, and he even wore a pair of thick frame glasses. Michaela had only seen Harry once, and it was at night when the light wasn't good. It was impossible for her to recognize Harry. Even if she recognized him, Harry didn't care. In any case, he had plenty of excuses to cover it up. Michaela rolled up her sleeves and revealed her white arm. It was like a thin lotus root that was very durable to look at. June skillfully opened the disposable syringe and used the alcohol cotton to wipe Michaela's arm a few times before quickly stabbing it with the needle. The bright red blood was slowly drawn into the needle, and Harry, who was beside, stared at this moment. Michaela was still afraid and turned her head away, not daring to look. Hannah, who was behind her, was so nervous that her small face turned pale, and she almost fainted from fear. "Michaela, do you feel pain?" her friend asked in a low voice. Michaela shook her head in shock. "I originally thought that it would be very painful, but I didn't expect that it wouldn't hurt at all." "Don't lie to me," Hannah begged. "I'm not lying to you. It doesn't hurt." Michaela told the truth. Little did she know, because of her importance, June was very careful and didn't dare to relax at all. Very quickly, June finished drawing the blood. After June sealed it into the container bottle, she quietly handed it to Harry without anyone noticing. Michaela still had to carry out other tests, and Harry also got up and followed. After collecting her saliva, as well as the hair specimen that was quietly pulled out, and dealing with all of them properly, Harry had gotten everything he needed. "Ah!" A howl that sounded like a pig being slaughtered was heard. Everyone turned their heads to look in the direction of the sound. It was Hannah who was having her blood drawn out. In the end, she howled as if she had broken a bone. She kept screaming. "Michaela, didn't you say that it doesn't hurt?" Hannah shouted in pain. Michaela curiously spread out her hands. "It really doesn't hurt. Is there a need for you to shout so exaggeratedly?" Harry instantly knew what was going on. He held back his laughter and looked at June. Today they disguised themselves as medical staff and came here. Their main purpose was to collect Michaela's genetic material. Since it was already completed, there was no need to stay here anymore. However, when it came to playing their part, June and the Wolf Guard had to stay. They couldn't leave immediately to avoid making people feel strange. However, June didn't have the patience to do physical examinations for other unrelated people. Hence, her actions were a little rough. Hannah was the first victim. It wasn't easy to inject needles, and June even gave her a few needles consecutively. It would be strange if it didn't hurt. When Hannah finally finished drawing the blood, she was crying. Class 4 had all completed the physical examination process. Harry and the rest also withdrew without the students noticing. The next class would be examined by the original medical team. After getting Michaela's genetic test samples, Harry divided them into 10 parts and sent them to different testing institutes. Among the 10 pieces, one of them was personally brought by Harry to Maryland Sanctuary Hospital. This was his own business. He wanted to see the sample test from beginning to end with his own eyes. He wanted to ensure that it wouldn't go through unrelated people and also ensure that the test results were real. Finally, under the anxious wait, all 10 test results were out. Looking at the conclusion on the report, Harry was so excited that his hands were shaking. The few pages in his hands felt like lead weights. It made Harry's breathing become rapid, because all the reports pointed out that Michaela was his sister, the sister of the same father and different mother. There was no doubt about it. This time, Harry no longer had any doubts. He wanted to rush to the mountain city to see Michaela again. On the way back to the city, Harry was so excited that he couldn't control his emotions. He didn't expect that he would have any close relatives after his parents died. Although the rest of the Parker family was technically Harry's relatives, there was no familial love in the same big family due to their conflicts of interests. Michaela was Harry's only immediate relative in this world, because they had the same father. That was why Michaela was Harry's biological sister. "Sir, you haven't slept for 2 days. You should get some sleep," June said gently. Harry shook his head. "How can I sleep now?" Harry didn't have the slightest intention of resting. He couldn't wait to see Michaela again. June asked, "Sir, after we reach the mountain city, have you thought of how to tell the young lady?" Speaking up to this point, Harry's excited face froze. He really didn't think of this aspect. Although they were biological siblings, the two of them hadn't met in their whole lives and didn't know each other. Michaela might not believe Harry if he were to come out and say that they were siblings. "I haven't thought about it yet." Harry shook his head. June continued, "Regarding Michaela's parents, I did another round of investigations. Do you want to hear about it?" Harry said, "Oh, what investigation did you do? What did you find?" "Yes. This also needs to be mentioned about Michaela's mother. She had been a model before and had been making the rounds of different designers and fashion shows. 17 years ago, she attended a charity banquet, and at that time, your father was also invited to participate." Speaking up to this point, June didn't want to continue. Harry could figure out where the story was going. She smiled helplessly. They had met at the banquet and hit it off. One thing led to another, and Michaela was conceived. Harry didn't expect that his father would have an affair when he was young. He didn't understand why his father would leave Michaela and her mother. Harry guessed that his father just didn't know that he had a daughter. Michaela's mother gave birth and didn't try to contact her father. Harry felt that this was somewhat incomprehensible. A lot of women in the modeling world wanted to sleep around so they could get money from the rich man that fathered their child. Michaela's mother made no attempt to do so, which was out of the ordinary. Harry's father would have checked if he was worried he might have gotten Michaela's mother pregnant. However, Michaela's mother was pregnant and gave birth to a child, but she never looked for Harry's father. Harry was puzzled. "This doesn't make sense," Harry said in puzzlement. June understood what Harry was thinking and explained, "Sir, there is nothing that I don't understand. Think about it. Your father was a different kind of man when he was young. After that night with Michaela's mother, I don't think he would remember her name or face. Even if Michaela's mother wanted to find him later, your father was not an easy man to reach publicly." Harry began to realize why Michaela's mother never reached out. Harry's father was as unreachable to the common people as Harry was now. His identity was secret, just like the knowledge of the whole Parker family was a secret. The doubt in Harry's heart immediately disappeared. But in the next second, Harry became nervous. He said to June, "Say, do you think I still have other brothers and sisters that I just don't know about?" June said in surprise. "Sir, do you mean that you might have more siblings that your father didn't know about?" Harry nodded solemnly. He felt that according to his father's dissolute and unruly character when he was young. June held back her laughter and said, "Sir, don't worry. Based on the information I've gathered so far, there was only one woman who had a child with your father, and that was Michaela's mother." Harry heaved a sigh of relief. That's good, that's good. When the plane arrived at the city, Harry changed into his street clothes. Because he hadn't figured out how to get in touch with Michaela, Harry decided to walk around the same area and think of a way to get close to Michaela and get to know her. When Harry felt that the time was right, he would explain everything to her. However, Harry was a stranger. He had no idea how to approach Michaela. He knew it would take time. When he returned to Michaela's neighborhood again, Harry wandered aimlessly. Michaela was now in her third year of high school. She had spent most of her time studying. She spent almost all of her time in school. Harry didn't have the chance to have too much contact with Michaela, which made him feel somewhat depressed. However, his subordinate suggested that they would forge a teacher's identity for Harry and let him sneak into Michaela's school. If that was the case, the two of them would have more chances to meet. However, Harry could only force a smile and reject this idea because Michaela had already met Harry. At that time, Harry's identity was that of a construction worker from out of town. He couldn't possibly become a teacher in her high school. Just as Harry was at his wit's end, a surprised voice came from behind him. "It's you? Why are you here?" When Harry heard the voice, his body trembled. When he turned around, he saw Michaela looking at Harry with a surprised expression. Harry was also very surprised. He looked at the time and asked, "Shouldn't you be at school? Why are you here?" Seeing Michaela's calm look, Harry thought that she skipped class and ran out. "No, I just forgot to bring my textbooks. I asked one of my teachers if I could come back home to get them," Michaela said, embarrassed. Michaela saw that Harry was still dressed the same as before and didn't look like he had been in a fight. Michaela asked very caringly, "Are you all right here? Did Hess ever find you?" Harry smiled and put on a relaxed look. "Hess? No." Michaela was surprised. "How is that possible? He is the overlord of the old city." Harry found an excuse to explain. "I found a guy downtown. He solved it for me." "Is that so? Your new friend is really amazing." Michaela didn't have the slightest doubt. In fact, when she saw Harry appear here safe and sound, she believed that Hess was no longer a problem. Hess and his men were all scared. None of them dared to act rashly again. That night, they packed their luggage and left the city with their tails between their legs. As long as Harry was still in the city, none of them would dare come back. However, Michaela didn't know what had really happened. She had no reason to doubt Harry. Michaela didn't ask about them in detail. Anyway, in her heart, as long as Harry, who had helped her, was fine, she was happy. "Yeah, I also didn't think that it would be so easy to solve it." Harry tried to cover it up. Michaela smiled happily and asked, "By the way, I haven't asked your name yet. Where are you from?" Harry became nervous after being asked. He thought for a while and said, "My name is Harry. I came from Florida." Michaela pictured that people from Florida would sound like the stereotypical beachgoer. Harry didn't sound anything like that, which made her realize that her initial assumption was silly. She asked out of concern, "Then what are you doing here? Are you here just for me?" Her tone was sarcastic, but Harry was on guard because he had his own motives. Harry panicked. He was indeed here to find Michaela, but he couldn't say it openly. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good if Michaela misunderstood something. He quickly found an excuse in his heart, but Harry wasn't good at lying. He couldn't come up with a reasonable excuse in a short period of time. Michaela, on the other hand, smiled and said, "You came from Florida to find work. You must want to find a place to rent, right?" Harry heaved a sigh of relief. He thought that it was his sister who was considerate and took the initiative to send her over. Harry quickly nodded and said, Yes, I'm here to look for a house to rent." "Did you find one yet?" "Not yet. I just started looking for one," said Harry. Michaela thought about it and recommended, "I know someone that might be able to help, but you can't rent just one room, so you need to rent the whole house." Harry still nodded and said, "All right, that should be doable." Michaela sized Harry up and down and said in puzzlement, "Are you sure you could afford it? The landlord is going to ask for 3 months' rent in advance." The entire rental of the building wasn't cheap to begin with. Michaela didn't have the courage to directly tell Harry if he had the money to pay so much rent. The house was old and located in the old city. It was still more desirable than a house farther from downtown. The location alone raised the price of the home significantly. Harry didn't look like a man who had a lot of money. Michaela judged by his clothes that he was poor and probably couldn't afford to rent an entire house. Harry scratched his head and said helplessly, "I can tell that you think I don't have money. I do. It's in my savings account. I just never touch the money unless it is an emergency." Michaela shook her head. "Don't misunderstand. I didn't mean it like that." Harry waved his hand and spoke. "All good. I didn't take it to heart. Where is the house you are talking about?" "It's right in front of mine. It's actually my neighbor from the other side. He just moved to the new city." Michaela raised her finger and said. Harry's eyes lit up. It was actually Michaela's neighbor. There was no place more suitable than this. Harry decided that he would rent this house no matter what. He immediately clapped his hands and said, "Okay, take me to see the place. Can you contact the landlord?" Michaela smiled and said, "The landlord handed the key to me for safekeeping. I can show you the place. Also, I can help you negotiate the price." Harry was satisfied and said, "That would be great." The two of them walked towards the building where Michaela's house was located. On the way, Michaela curiously asked about Harry's background. It wasn't that she had ulterior motives, but that she was simply curious about the person who had saved her. Michaela had a very mysterious impression of Harry in her heart, but she also had a good impression of him. To be able to stop a local bully like Hess, Harry was already a great hero to Michaela. Now that Harry wanted to rent a house, Michaela naturally had to help him. After all, Harry had helped her before. If she ignored him now, she would seem ungrateful. Michaela brought Harry to the third floor of a building. She said, "This is my house. The house opposite is the one you will be renting." Harry asked, "Didn't you come back home to get the textbooks? You'll be late if you take me to see the house, won't you?" Michaela waved her hand generously. "It's fine. It'll not take long to look at the house." "All right then. Thank you for helping me so much. I will treat you to a meal later." Harry thanked her as if she was a stranger. Michaela shook her head. "There is no need, honestly. It's just a small matter. Besides, the landlord of this house wanted me to rent it out for him." How could Harry give up such a great opportunity? He said solemnly, "No, I am very satisfied with this house. You have helped me a lot. I have to thank you." Michaela was very puzzled. "You have only seen the front door, and you don't want to see the rest before spending your money?" Harry sweated a little. He thought that he was too anxious and almost exposed himself again. He had never been that good at acting. He said, "There's no need to look carefully. Just looking at the layout of the living room is enough to satisfy me." He thought in his heart, even if this place was a kennel, he would still have to live in it. "About the rent, you—" Michaela still had some doubts about Harry. Originally, most of the workers from other places would choose to build their own houses at a cheap price. Very few people could afford to rent a studio or rent a whole house. "You give my landlord a call. I'll talk to him. Hurry up and get your textbooks and go back to school. Don't let the teacher scold you if you're late." Michaela finally told Harry the landlord's number and went home to get her textbooks. She said goodbye to Harry and hurried back to school. Harry called the landlord and asked him a few questions. Then he asked the landlord if he wanted to sell the house. According to common sense, many of the owners of the old houses in the old city district wanted to sell the old houses when the market was good. A lot of people took out mortgages on houses and were in massive debt. The landlord was no exception. Taking out a mortgage on the old city house as well as one in the new city was a huge thing to handle. The news was that the old city was going to be demolished to make way for new construction. The rumor was, homeowners were going to be paid well for their property so they could move. This landlord refused to sell no matter what because he was waiting for that massive payout. Harry insisted on buying the house. He felt that renting the house was too troublesome. If anything happened to the landlord, it would cause problems for him. It would be easier to buy it directly. Unfortunately, the landlord insisted on not selling it to Harry. Harry didn't want to force him. Harry could outbid any construction company. That little compensation for the demolition was a joke in front of Harry's wealth. Harry considered that after buying the house, the landlord would have no connection with this place anymore, and Michaela would inevitably have doubts about Harry if she found out. Harry didn't want to reveal his identity and wealth too suddenly, so he compromised. If he wanted to rent a house, then he would rent it. Anyway, he wouldn't stay here for a long time. After he got to know Michaela, Harry would definitely wait for Michaela to leave this place. Harry gave the landlord a year's worth of rent. At $3,000 a month, Harry paid $36,000. Everything happened very quickly. Harry used half a day to move into the house opposite Michaela's house. At night, Michaela didn't go home first after school. Instead, she knocked on Harry's door. Obviously, she had already found out from the landlord that Harry had paid rent and moved in. Harry came out to open the door when he heard the noise. Michaela held her hands behind her back and walked into the room. She smiled and said to Harry, "I didn't expect you to have so much money. You just paid a year's rent. That is a lot of money." Harry responded, "That was pretty much of all my savings. I don't have a whole lot left." Michaela didn't quite understand and asked, "You are here to work and earn money, yet you have enough to pay for a house for an entire year. Seems odd to me." Harry stiffly explained, "You have to spend money. It's the whole reason we make it in the first place." Michaela tilted her head and thought for a moment. In the end, she couldn't understand Harry's nonsense and shook her head. "I really don't understand. All right, I came to see you. By the way, have you gone to the store to get everything you need? If you don't have anything to eat, I can get you some from home for you." "I don't need anything, so there's no need for you to help. Thank you," Harry said. When the landlord moved out, the appliances and furniture in the house were basically untouched. Harry only needed to buy some personal items when he moved in. There was no need to go overboard with his renovations. Furthermore, Harry saw that Michaela was very tired and knew that she must be exhausted after staying at school for the whole day. He said thoughtfully, "You should go home and rest. I see that you are so tired that you can't even open your eyes." Michaela's heart suddenly warmed up. For so many years, she had never been cared for at home, but when she was with a stranger like Harry, she felt the feeling of being related. She said gratefully, "Yes, thank you. I'll go home. Goodbye." "Oh, that's right." Harry sent Michaela out and spoke again. "Don't forget that I still have to treat you to a meal. When are you free? You must tell me." "No need. You have already rented a house, so don't waste money on someone like me." Michaela refused in embarrassment. Harry insisted, "Hey, how much can a meal cost? The key is that you have to give me a chance to express my gratitude. We have an agreement. Don't go back on your word." Then, "All right, I'll let you know when I'm free tomorrow." Michaela could only agree. She waved at Harry and opened the door to her house. Harry stood at the door and watched for a while. He quietly closed the door of the house and then started to dance excitedly. His plan was progressing nicely. Harry wanted to throw off his disguise and tell Michaela who he was since the moment he was sure they were siblings. Harry was an extremely wealthy man. His life was wildly different from what Michaela was used to. Michaela was just a young girl who grew up in an ordinary family that was living paycheck to paycheck. She had been living a hard life since she was young. If she suddenly knew that she had a big brother who had a shocking amount of wealth and power, Harry wouldn't know what kind of reaction she would have. Harry wanted to disguise himself and slowly interact with Michaela because he wanted to fully understand her. He wanted to get to know her. If she turned out to be a bad person, telling her about his wealth might make her insufferable. Harry would never acknowledge her as his younger sister. At most, he would give her a small fortune that she would never be able to use up for the rest of her life. He would do his best as her elder brother, but he wouldn't tell her about the Parker family. However, from the results of their two interactions, Michaela's character wasn't bad. She knew her place in the world and was willing to help others. Harry was very sympathetic towards his half-sister. Harry had been living a luxurious life since he was young. Although he had experienced a tough life before he inherited anything, he was still the one who controlled his own fate. She had never been loved since she was young, and she had often been looked down upon. If it had been anyone else, they would have been sunk into a deep depression, and it would have been easy for them to accumulate negative emotions. Harry was impressed that despite Michaela's family, she was willing to work hard to get away from her toxic family. Watching Michaela's house from the one he rented, and he listened for any yelling. Soon he saw a few of the lights go out. Harry relaxed and picked up his phone to instruct. "June, you can come over now." Harry lived here now. Harry wasn't used to being alone. In the morning, Harry went out to look around Michaela's school. He wanted to know more about his sister's life. Coincidentally, just as he opened the door, he met Howie, who was about to go to school. He saw Harry walk out from the opposite door. Howie was stunned for a moment. He didn't expect that someone would actually live in the dingy old house across the street. Then, when he saw Harry, his eyes became blank again. After a moment, He finally remembered where he had seen Harry. 2 days ago, when he had a conflict with the women at the basketball court, he remembered that Harry was there on the sidelines watching. Howie was immediately unhappy and said coldly, "So it's you. How did a poor man like you rent the whole house?" Harry didn't have a good impression of Howie either, but he didn't really hate him. He glanced at him indifferently and didn't want to bother with this insensible child. He turned around and went downstairs. Who knew that Howie wouldn't let him leave? He chased after Harry and pulled on his shirt. "Hey, I'm talking about you. Are you deaf?" Harry glanced at him and said, "I don't have time to waste with a little kid like you." "You're so arrogant. How dare you look down on me and say I'm a little kid?" Howie said angrily. Harry smiled. "What? Isn't that the case? You're practically a baby. Why would I want to talk to you?" After saying that, he shook Howie off and left. He was furious that Harry had left Howie alone on the spot. He muttered under his breath. After baring his teeth at Harry's back, Howie pushed his bicycle and ran to the school. Harry was like an ordinary person. He walked out of the neighborhood and arrived at the bus stop, waiting for the bus to go to Michaela's school. After getting on the bus for 3 stops, he arrived at his destination. Mountain City High School wasn't considered a private high school. It just had a lot of the same features. Uniforms and class schedules mimicked those of a private school. The Department of Education wanted to test out this new form of learning in a public school to see if student grades would improve. The Department of Education didn't value it as highly as some of the other schools in the other parts of the city. They favored other schools, but they would use new systems at Michaela's school before they introduced them to other schools. The school was old and outdated. Their textbooks and learning materials were several years out of date. The school couldn't afford to buy new textbooks. They barely had enough to keep the lights on. During the morning, many students would be studying on their own or in groups. They had time between some classes to get some extra work done. Harry, who was standing outside the school, was intoxicated by the pleasant sounds. When he thought about how his sister was studying hard in one of the classrooms, Harry felt even more gratified. Michaela's home life wasn't good, but it didn't make her want to give up. Instead, it made her stronger and more outgoing than most kids her age. She was still lively and cheerful when she wasn't home. She was a lovable girl. This was something Harry paid special attention to. He needed to know if he would have to teach her family a lesson for abusing her. Michaela knew that if she worked hard enough, it wouldn't matter that her home life wasn't good. She could make it in the world and even thrive. Letting her know that he had a large amount of wealth and power would curb her desire for self-improvement. Michaela seemed like a strong-headed lady, but he couldn't tell her everything just yet. A superior life could easily destroy a person, so a positive personality was the most valuable. Harry kept wandering around the school. After the morning self-study time ended, the students walked out of the classroom and headed to the cafeteria for breakfast. There were many students that went to a couple of stores and gas stations nearby to grab snacks. The management of Mountain City High School wasn't very strict. Students could go out to eat at will as long as they weren't late to class. Seeing that all the students were walking out, Harry wasn't sure if he should continue to stay here and observe or leave. While he was hesitating, he ran into Michaela. "Ah, Harry, why are you here?" Michaela was very surprised to see Harry. Yesterday, Harry had already told Michaela his name. Therefore, Michaela already knew Harry's name and his contact details. However, she didn't expect to see Harry at the school gate so early in the morning. Hannah was still by Michaela's side and also looked very surprised. "Handsome, why are you here?" After saying that, she realized the way Michaela addressed Harry and asked even more puzzledly, "Hey, how do you know his name? When did you guys get to know each other?" Harry smiled and said, "Michaela helped me find a place to stay yesterday. It happened to be opposite her house." Hannah opened her mouth wide in shock. She looked at Harry and then at Michaela. She said in shock, "He lives opposite of your house now?" Michaela nodded. "Yes, it just so happens that he lives in the opposite house." "Wow, no kidding? Lucky you." Hannah didn't speak implicitly. It made Michaela blush. "What are you saying?" Harry stood at the side and didn't explain much. Michaela looked at Harry and said, "You haven't said why you are here?" Harry was stunned. After a while he said, I am here to walk around and see if there are any suitable jobs." Harry came up with the excuse on the spot. Hannah was very puzzled as she looked at Harry, but she didn't say anything else. Harry looked around and said, "We agreed that I would take you out to eat as thanks. Since we have met, I might as well take you out now." Michaela quickly refused. "No need. There is really no need to treat me to anything." Hannah was dissatisfied and said, "Don't be stupid. We have to take him up on his offer. Breakfast isn't the best meal to say thanks with. No matter what, I will need a big dinner to be satisfied. Michaela stood by the side and pulled Hannah and said softly, "What are you talking about? Harry just rented a whole house and doesn't have much money on him. Don't take advantage of him." Hannah said, "How much can a meal cost? We don't have much time now. We need to finish breakfast and go back to school. We will have lots of time for dinner." "No way. Why are you doing this?" Michaela didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Hannah said to Harry, "What do you think?" Harry agreed and quickly nodded. "You are right. There is no sincerity in treating you to only breakfast. When you have time, I will treat you to the best meal." Harry agreed. Hannah smiled so hard that she couldn't open her eyes. "It's a deal." Harry smiled. "Of course, I always keep my word." Michaela originally wanted to reject, but seeing that many of her classmates were passing by, she was too embarrassed to continue rejecting. After thinking for a while, she said, "Have you eaten yet? Why don't we go somewhere near here? The food near the school is good and it isn't all that expensive." Of course, Harry wouldn't waste the opportunity to be with his sister. He gladly agreed. "Okay, we can give it a try." The three of them came to a snack stall because Harry was from out of town. After Michaela prodded Harry a little, she decided to introduce a few popular dishes to him. The street stalls were filled with students from Mountain City High School. People like Harry, who wore casual clothes, were very conspicuous in front of a group of students who wore school uniforms. Moreover, eating at the same table as Michaela and her friend attracted the attention of countless people. Harry didn't care about this curious crowd at all. He just wanted to eat and drink with his sister. On the other hand, Michaela kept her head down and felt very uncomfortable. Hannah, on the other hand, was like Harry. She only cared about eating and drinking and didn't care about the surrounding gazes. Seeing that Michaela was very reserved, Harry asked in a considerate manner, "Isn't it inappropriate for me to sit with you guys and eat?" "Why not?" Hannah said. Harry said, "There are so many of your classmates around. Won't they say anything if they see us?" Hannah laughed and said, "Of course they will. Don't you know?" Harry asked curiously, "What should I know?" Hannah said, "Michaela is the prettiest girl in school by far, and she is probably the smartest girl in our class. She goes above and beyond at school so everyone knows her and likes her, which also means a lot of boys think they are in love with her." Harry stared at her in an exaggerated manner. "Really? She's that popular?" Hannah was very self-satisfied and said, "Of course. Now that we are having breakfast, you're going to upset a lot of boys. You might have to fight a few of them." "Wow, I think you're exaggerating a little," Harry said in surprise. Hannah smiled and pointed at Harry's seat. "It's not exaggerated at all. Just to be able to sit with Michaela while eating is already the dream of many boys. You should feel incomparably honored to be able to sit here today." Harry nodded. "Yes, I'm very honored." Harry didn't feel that Hannah's words were exaggerated. Michaela was Harry's sister, but no one at the stall knew but him. Mountain City High School was an old school in the old city. There weren't many children from wealthy families here. They would have no idea who Harry truly was. He felt safe knowing he wouldn't run into some super rich kid that wanted to cause trouble for Harry. Harry pretended like he didn't know. Harry knew Michaela was pretty, and he understood that she would attract more attention than most girls. There were many factors involved when it came to being naturally pretty. For example, the children of rich families had balanced nutrition because they could afford a wide range of meals, so they were healthy looking. They had a distinct advantage over other kids as they would normally not have as much stress in their home life. Kids were more susceptible to being affected by stress, causing their bodies to form poorly. Michaela was born in a poor family and didn't receive much love since she was young. She had been seen as a burden by her mother for years. Michaela would internalize this hatred and use it to fuel her passion to succeed in school. She was the exception to the rule. She was lucky to be graced with beauty genes from both her mother and father. Harry looked at Michaela's face, which was very similar to his, and felt very gratified for a moment. Being able to have a younger sister was a very exciting thing for Harry. However, the way Harry stared at Michaela could be misunderstood as a different emotion. Michaela naturally lowered her head in embarrassment. Hannah looked at Harry and said discontentedly, "Hey, it is very rude of you to stare at Michaela like that. You come here so early in the day and you stare at her like that. You have a crush on her, right?" Harry was stunned. He hadn't thought about what it might look like when he was with his sister. Knowing that this was a misunderstanding, Harry quickly explained, "No, I was just looking around town. You think too much." Hannah snorted. "I just realized that the two of you really look somewhat similar." Michaela jumped in fright and pulled Hannah to stop. Quickly, stop talking. The more you speak, the more my head hurts. Hannah smiled and said, What? I'm telling the truth. Look carefully at the two of you. Both of you look very similar. Hannah sighed and felt a little disappointed with her looks. She could only sigh that she didn't get lucky with good genes. Michaela didn't eat well every day and still looked great. Harry thought that he mustn't let Hannah continue talking. The more she talked about this similarity, the more unhappy they became. If Michaela misunderstood, it would be hard to get in touch with her in the future. He quickly said, I just came out to find a job and coincidentally came here. Besides, I already have a girlfriend. Huh? You have a girlfriend? Hannah looked at Harry in shock. Yes, Harry said. Of course, Hannah only complained in her head. In her eyes, although Harry was poor, he was incredibly handsome. The three of them were speechless for a moment, and then they started to eat quietly. He watched the two of them eat quickly. Harry couldn't help but say, Although you still have to rush to class, don't eat too fast. It's easy to get indigestion from eating too quickly. Michaela smiled because she was too embarrassed to speak again due to the awkwardness just now. Hannah didn't feel embarrassed at all and said, Do you usually treat your girlfriend so well? This sentence made Harry choke. He didn't have a real girlfriend. Now that he thought about it, Harry felt that he really didn't care about girls enough. Scratching his head, Harry said, This should barely qualify as treating a girl, but there are still many things that I could do better. Hannah gave a thumbs up and said, You are so meticulous and still feel that you aren't doing enough. I really admire you. Really? Thank you for the compliment. Harry wiped the sweat off his face. Hannah said, I actually want you to be my boyfriend. Instantly, Harry began to sweat again. Looking at Hannah's bloated body, Harry felt that he couldn't bear it. Hannah saw that Harry was even more embarrassed and quickly said, I was just joking. Don't take it seriously. He could only nod his head and say seriously, Yes, I know you were joking. The atmosphere returned to normal under this interruption. The three of them chatted and laughed and didn't notice that there were a few boys surrounding them. Hey, you loser! Hurry up and get lost! A very arrogant voice said to Harry. The three of them raised their heads in shock. Harry looked around and said in surprise, Are you talking to me? Standing in front of Harry were 5 boys wearing the school uniform of Michaela's high school. At this time, they were staring at Harry with anger. The leader was gnashing his teeth in anger. He looked like he wished he could eat Harry alive. Hannah looked at these boys and shouted, Chad, who are you talking to? It's none of your business that we are eating here. Michaela frowned but didn't say anything because Hannah had already said everything. Harry could see that this guy called Chad was very annoying. Michaela looked pained by his voice. Harry could also tell that Chad was definitely Michaela's admirer. Seeing him and Michaela sitting at the same table made him unhappy. Chad ignored Hannah and went forward to push Harry and clamored, I told you to get lost. You have ears. Do you think you deserve to be here? The students who were passing by started to make noise and gathered around to watch. Harry sat very steadily. Chad pushed him, but Harry barely budged. Instead, Chad was forced back 2 steps. When the surrounding students saw this scene, they let out some laughter. Chad's face grew red. I'm talking to you. Are you deaf or mute? Harry shook his head speechlessly. This sentence sounded very familiar. Howie had said something similar this morning, but he didn't expect to hear it almost exactly the same. Harry's silent look made the surrounding students think that he was frightened by Chad. Hey, Chad, he's just some poor guy. You really want to pick a fight with him? Said a tall student. That's right. You're being unreasonable, said a short student. Don't say it too loudly. Chad isn't someone to be trifled with, said the tall student. I heard that Chad's family is very rich. I wouldn't mess with him if I were that guy, said a student. The surrounding people all felt that Harry was really unlucky today, an honest construction worker meeting an arrogant rich kid like Chad. However, Michaela and Hannah weren't worried about Harry. That night, Harry unleashed his strength and knocked away the local snake, Hess. After the incident, nothing happened, and Hess didn't dare to come back to take revenge. Michaela and Hannah knew that Harry had beaten up the local snake that night. Although he didn't have money, his fighting ability was awesome. Even a fierce bully like Hess could be easily dealt with. Chad would be a walk in the park. However, considering that Chad's family was rumored to be rich, Michaela was worried that Harry would cause some trouble for some rich loser. She gave Harry a worried look, and Harry shook his head at her, indicating that she should feel at ease. He stood up slowly and faced Chad. I am neither deaf nor mute. You pushed me for no reason. Do you want to die? Harry's words shocked everyone. No one had thought that Harry, who looked like a poor worker, would be so tough in front of a rich kid like Chad. I didn't take a closer look just now, but you guys didn't realize now that he's so handsome. A girl looked at Harry and said in a slightly intoxicated manner, "Yeah, how can he be so handsome? He's just a construction worker." When Chad heard the discussions around him, he almost exploded with anger. Chad's family was actually poor 2 years ago, but his father later won a small prize in the lottery. Then he used the money to buy an old mine. Then, when he was exploring, he happened upon a new vein system of a very valuable ore. They immediately became rich. Therefore, Chad started dressing like he had always been rich. He became the type of rich kid people see in movies. He was arrogant and pushed people around whenever he liked. On the other hand, although Harry wasn't wearing good clothes, he still looked incredibly imposing. He towered over the high school kids. This made Chad even more unhappy. The crowd was talking about it. Some of them were afraid of Chad, but there were also some who didn't mind it being a big deal. For some reason, they all urged Chad to teach Harry a lesson. "Chad, this guy thinks he is tough. Beat him up," said a kid. "That's right. Everyone is watching. Don't worry. No one will report this to the teachers," said a kid with glasses. Chad was angry when he heard that. "I'm not afraid of the teachers, so what if you report this to the teachers?" Harry looked at this guy who was chattering. He was also very unhappy that he disturbed his sister and him eating breakfast. This was the first time Harry had a meal with his sister. The guards hiding in the crowd wanted to stop them. At the very least, they wanted to drag Chad away. However, Harry decided to teach this ignorant man a lesson himself. "I'll count to 3. Get out of my sight immediately, or you will regret it," Harry said coldly to Chad. Of course, Chad wouldn't leave. He had so many classmates guarding him. More importantly, Michaela was watching from the side. He was originally unhappy that Harry and Michaela were together. Therefore, there was no need for Harry to make him regret it. He wanted Harry to regret it now. "I'm being nice to you, but I don't want to listen to you. I want you to kneel down now." After saying that, Chad raised his leg and kicked toward Harry. Harry wasn't the best martial artist, but he had been training and had fought stronger people before. Chad was a high schooler. He had no experience and just flailed wildly. Harry knew he could take him. As he turned around and dodged the kick, Chad almost fell over. Then he lifted his right knee and accurately kicked the bend of Chad's leg that was still supporting him. A piercing crack was heard. Chad couldn't hold back his own weight and directly fell to the ground. Both his legs were split and he slipped on the ground and his jeans split in the middle. His red underpants were revealed, causing the surrounding onlookers to burst into laughter. The laughter made Chad angry from embarrassment. He covered the hole and stood up and shouted, "You loser! How dare you rip my clothes? Do you know how much my clothes are worth?" Harry was puzzled. "It's just an ordinary school uniform. How much could it be worth?" Chad was so angry that he jumped up and down. "I'm talking about these designer underpants. Can you even afford to pay for it if you rip them?" Harry was even more confused. "Are they from some designer brand?" "Of course, this pair cost me $1,000. Harry held back his laughter. Instantly, the crowd burst into laughter. Chad covered his crotch and his face turned red. "I'm not going to waste my time with a poor guy like you. You can either pay me or I beat you up. You choose." Harry waved his hand. "I choose the third option. I will beat you up." Chad was completely enraged by Harry's fearless look. He said to the people behind him, "Beat him to death." "Enough," Michaela scolded. "Michaela, I'm doing this for your own good. How dirty is this man? How can he sit with you and eat with you? What if he had some germs or something like that?" Michaela said angrily. "Do I know you? Also, this is my friend. Why don't you try to speak rudely again?" Chad was stunned. Chad had chased after Michaela for an entire year. He was puzzled that she would make friends with someone like Harry. He looked almost like a beggar. "Michaela, is there something wrong with your eyes? What right does a poor construction worker have to be your friend? He's wearing tattered clothes," Chad said angrily. Michaela said seriously, "I am warning you, don't insult my friend anymore. You cannot look down on others even if you have money." Michaela's indifferent attitude was like a stab in Chad's heart. The disdain in the eyes of the onlookers was like countless steel needles that drilled into his flesh, making him feel uncomfortable all over. Immediately, he no longer cared about Michaela's attitude and wanted to vent all his anger on Harry. "Beat me up? Today I will beat you to death." Chad pointed at Harry angrily and said. The few people behind him were his friends who often mingled together. When they saw Chad giving orders, they immediately started to fight Harry. Those who were swinging their fists and kicking their feet, all of them called out to Harry in an instant. The people around them all cried out in alarm. But in the next second, everyone's eyes were wide open. Harry was like a martial arts grandmaster, standing there calmly. Facing so many punches and kicks, he had no intention of dodging at all. With a few moves, he pushed Chad and his followers onto the ground. Seeing that they were still trying to get up, he raised his leg and pointed at them one by one. Chad landed on the ground hard. The surrounding people only blinked their eyes for a moment, and in the end, they discovered that Harry was the only one left standing. Chad and the others were unconscious on the ground. Everyone exclaimed in admiration. Michaela and Hannah, on the other hand, looked as if they had expected this. Both of them had already seen Harry in action. Chad and his followers were just ordinary students. In terms of fighting, they weren't even qualified to carry Hess's shoes. They actually wanted to fight Harry. Even Hess was beaten up like a dog in front of Harry. Chad was stunned. Looking at his 4 followers lying on the ground motionlessly, and then looking at Harry, he panicked. Chad had no idea that he would have picked a fight with someone that was so strong. Harry wouldn't be polite to him. Chad had disturbed his sister's meal. In Harry's heart, Chad was just a piece of trash waiting to be tidied up. He stepped forward and kicked. "You're annoying, get lost." Chad could no longer get up. The onlookers cheered when they saw Harry show off his strength. A lot of the students were excited to see the fight. They didn't know who they wanted to win more. Chad was arrogant, but he left most people alone. Nobody knew who Harry was, but he looked older and stronger. Comparatively, when Harry and Michaela sat together to eat, it caused public anger. However, as the conflict developed, Chad's arrogant tone and style of doing things gradually caused everyone to be unhappy with him. He was a nasty bully, and no one liked a bully. The people who were watching the fight were mostly poor students. Many people hated pompous rich kids, who were always showing off and being arrogant. As for the construction worker, Harry, everyone began to feel sympathy for him. Therefore, when Harry knocked down Chad and his group, the surrounding people all cheered. No one was willing to help Chad. Instead, they even mocked and ridiculed him while he was down. "Wow, Chad picked the wrong guy to fight. He won in a clean fight with 5 opponents. He is so strong," said one of the students. "What happened just now? I didn't even see anything before Chad and the others fell to the ground." "Who can tell me what happened?" said another student. Harry didn't care what the people around him said. It didn't matter to him whether what they said was good or bad. The onlookers pitied Harry because they thought he was a poor construction worker. If these people knew that Harry was a super rich heir, they wouldn't be cheering him on. Everyone sympathized with the weak. Harry was now feeling sorry for the poor students. Harry had actually controlled his strength when he attacked just now. Otherwise, Chad would have been killed in one punch. After a while, Chad slowly regained his consciousness. Before he could recall what had happened just now, Harry squatted down. Harry bent down and whispered into Chad's ear, "Stay away from Michaela from now on. Don't bother her anymore. Otherwise, I'll make your life a living nightmare." Hearing Harry's warning, Chad finally understood what was going on. He originally thought that Harry was a poor construction worker, but he was actually a strong man. Chad couldn't figure out how he and his friends lost. No matter what Chad thought at the beginning, he was now terrified. Harry kept pressing his head with his hand. The surging force made Chad feel like his head would explode like a watermelon. Harry frowned and impatiently questioned Chad. "Answer me. Are you still going to pester Michaela in the future?" Chad quickly replied, "No, I won't. Sir, please don't kill me. I really won't pursue her, I swear." Looking at Chad's cowardly look, Harry knew that what he said was true. He let go of Chad's hand and quickly stood up. Harry had already let go, but Chad was still lying on the ground begging for mercy. He looked very pathetic, causing everyone around him to laugh. Chad heard the surrounding people and immediately cried, "Please, can I go now? I swear that I'll never bother Michaela again in the future. Can you let me go?" Without Harry's permission, Chad didn't even dare to stand up. Harry didn't want to continue making things difficult for Chad. Regardless of whether what he said was true or false, even if what he said was false in order to survive, Harry didn't care. He guarded Michaela. As long as Chad continued to pester her, Harry didn't mind teaching him a lesson that he would never forget for the rest of his life. "Get lost. Remember what you said. Don't let me see you again in the future," Harry said impatiently. Chad immediately felt as if he had been pardoned from a great punishment, and he brought his followers with him as they scrambled away from this place. When the crowd saw him run away with his wet pants in a sorry state, they all burst into laughter. The rich kid was beaten bloody. This kind of scene was really pleasing to the eyes of the poor. Michaela and Hannah walked up to Harry and asked with concern, "Are you all right?" Harry smiled and said, "Yes. I can beat 10 more guys just like him with one hand tied behind my back. Michaela smiled and shook her head. She felt that she had worried for nothing just now. Thank you. You helped me again. Harry waved his hand and spoke. What do you mean? This was my problem. Why did you help me? Michaela said with a red face. I heard what you said to Chad just now. He also annoys me. I just couldn't chase him away on my own, so thank you. Harry looked at the time and spoke. Okay. Don't be polite with me anymore. It's almost time. You should go back to class. Michaela also looked at the time and was shocked. Oh, I'm going to be late. After saying that, she quickly waved goodbye to Harry and then pulled Hannah along. The two of them ran quickly towards the school. Only then did the surrounding people who were immersed in watching the fun react. They were also students and had the same class time as Michaela. In an instant, there were cries of shock, and the entire food stand was in chaos. In a short 10 seconds, the snack street was empty and instantly became quiet. Harry forced a smile and paid for the stall where he had just eaten. After the boss had settled the bill, he still didn't forget to shake hands with Harry. He asked with an excited face, Young man, you are a martial arts expert, right? Do you know how to climb roofs and scale walls? Harry scratched his head. No, this isn't an action movie. I'm not sure what you're talking about, Harry said. The owner of the snack bar was sure that Harry was lying. He said unhappily, I saw it with my own eyes, but you still refuse to admit it. Harry was speechless. He had just knocked down a few high school students. There was nothing mysterious about his actions. Harry couldn't understand what he was being told. He thought back to his actions and came to the conclusion that all he did was a rather basic technique. He had learned it from June and her fighting style. Harry was stunned when he thought of this. He realized that others had said the same sort of things about June when they saw her fight. Harry had been so used to her fighting prowess that he didn't see it as such a remarkable ability. After bidding farewell to the blabbering stall owner, Harry once again strolled around the outskirts of Mountain City High School. He wanted to get a better lay of the land and make sure the surrounding area was suitable for Michaela. Although they were related by blood, they had been separated for 17 years. They didn't know each other. Harry was aware of their biological relationship, but Michaela wasn't. He didn't want to feel like a stranger to his sister. Therefore, it was necessary to familiarize himself with Michaela's living environment. After walking around, he concluded his survey of the area. Harry had nothing else to do, so he prepared to go back to the neighborhood for a stroll. It wasn't good for Harry to go in and disturb Michaela while she was in school, so he drove back to the neighborhood. As soon as he entered the neighborhood, Harry was surprised to find that he was being watched. Harry subtly motioned to his guards in plain clothes not to engage unless absolutely necessary. He didn't want to cause a commotion and reveal himself if any passers-by knew Michaela and her family. A rough-looking gang circled Harry with a young man he had met before, Howie. He didn't expect Howie to keep his promise of seeking revenge so soon. He brought a group of people to confront Harry, which was annoying. Howie was not a good person. Harry had his team investigate what they could about him and had found multiple run-ins with the law. They didn't find anything major, but he had several accounts of harassing others. Therefore, Harry did not have a good impression of Howie now. He didn't want to teach Howie a lesson because he didn't see much point in playing into this child's fantasy of being tougher than everyone around him. After all, Howie was still a junior high school student. Harry was not interested in humiliating or beating up a child. But now, confronted by a large group, Harry had to prepare for the worst. There seemed to be quite a number of people, about 20 of them. Each of them walked towards Harry with malicious looks in their eyes. Harry knew that he couldn't be fooled today. He had to fight again. The men Chad brought were a walk in the park for Harry. However, the group of punks that Howie brought didn't look like they would be the same kind of pushovers. They were all carrying weapons, steel pipes, batons, and even butterfly knives. Harry knew that children are taught values by their parents, which they take into their adult lives and into the real world. What Howie had learned was that you could bully people and do anything you wanted when your parents had the money to pay people off and get you out of trouble. He rarely considered the consequences of his own actions. With so many people and all of them carrying weapons, Harry felt threatened. He couldn't guarantee that he could deal with so many gangsters alone, especially when he was unarmed. Facing so many armed gangsters, he would be injured if he was not careful. Howie brought a group of punks to stand in front of Harry. They all had arrogant looks on their faces. They stood together in an imposing manner and threatened Harry with their eyes. Howie, who stood at the front, looked at Harry with a smirk. He said with a sneer, "What do you think? I said I would teach you a lesson. You don't look so tough now. Harry shook his head and sighed helplessly. Didn't you go to school? Why did you have time to come out and block me? Did you skip class? Howie said with disdain. So I skipped class. Big deal. Even the teacher doesn't dare to interfere with me. What are you, the hall monitor? The group of hooligans laughed out loud in unison. Some of them were like Howie, delinquents in school. It was common for them to skip classes. There were also those who had dropped out of school a long time ago and were aimless gangsters. They didn't heed Harry's lecture. Harry smiled. He didn't care about the ridicule of these people at all. To these gangsters who lived at the bottom of society, Harry was from a different world entirely. Normally, he wouldn't come into contact with them at all. If Harry hadn't disguised himself to get close to Michaela, Howie wouldn't even have had the chance to speak to him. Harry didn't care what they thought. His indifferent attitude had once again infuriated Howie. Why are you pretending to be calm? I have brought more than 20 people with me, and today I'm going to cripple you. How dare you laugh at me? What are you laughing at? Howie shouted. Harry frowned. Do you believe that you will beat me today? You're just a bunch of gangsters. Do you really think I'm afraid? Howie stared at him and said, Fine. You're not afraid, right? My brothers specialize in teaching fear. I'll show you what we can do today. Ha, you're just a bunch of trash. You can't hurt me, Harry mocked. Howie couldn't take it anymore and shouted, Brothers, teach him a lesson. The group of delinquents shouted all kinds of profanities and rushed toward Harry. Harry didn't want to expose the existence of a large number of guards around him, but there were too many of them for him to take on alone. June, who was hiding at the side, could no longer hold herself back. She couldn't let Harry be in any danger. Without waiting for Harry's instructions, she called everyone and rushed forward. When Harry saw June appear from a hidden place, he knew that she couldn't bear to watch any longer. She exposed her whereabouts without an order. She should have been punished. However, when Harry was in danger, June had the right to make the decision. As long as it was to protect Harry's safety, June could do anything. The current situation was that Harry was in great danger. If June and the others were to hide their whereabouts and ignore it, Harry would be injured. Looking at the weapons carried by these gangsters, if they were ruthless, Harry's life would be in danger. Therefore, June could not continue watching. She called everyone and ran out. Howie was ready to see Harry kneeling on the ground while holding his head when he was being beaten. However, he didn't expect that a group of men in black would suddenly appear out of nowhere and stop them. There were even more men in black who appeared and surrounded them. The Wolf Guard had crawled out from the flames of war, so their imposing manner was naturally frightening. The killing intent that was unintentionally emitted from them made Howie and the others tremble in fear. At this moment, they had no way to teach Harry a lesson. The most important thing was to figure out what these people were doing. Howie had never felt so terrified when being stared at with murderous intent. However, he still mustered up some courage and asked stutteringly, You, what are you doing? Harry whispered to June, who was beside him. Don't reveal your identity. Use a fake to fool them. June nodded to indicate that she understood and then shouted loudly, The FBI is carrying out official business. Everyone hands on your head and kneel on the ground. Howie and the group of gangsters looked at each other. The group of thugs still had some guts. Those who wanted to try wanted to fight. However, when the group of Wolf Guard revealed their weapons, Howie and the group of hooligans immediately gave up. They were just gangsters with sticks and steel pipes in their hands. At most, they had pocket knives. But the people opposite them carried firearms. They were not on the same level. There was no choice but to admit defeat. Without waiting for instructions, they threw down the weapons in their hands and obediently knelt on the ground with their hands on their heads. Howie even said in a fawning manner, Let's talk it out. We're a bunch of kids, not criminals. That's right. We are still middle school students. You're after the wrong people. June walked forward and stared at them with a cold gaze. Cut the crap. You were about to assault this man. Whoever doesn't behave will be arrested, Howie said weakly. Seriously, we weren't doing anything. Men, haul them all away. June's words scared Howie. He did not expect that she would really take them away. Moreover, he did not know where they were going. He felt even more scared. From the corner of his eye, he saw Harry standing outside the crowd unscathed. He still had that expression of watching a show. Howie was even more angry. Didn't you say that everyone was being taken away? What about him? Howie said as he pointed at Harry. In his mind, today's incident was nothing more than bringing people to block Harry's path. Since it was because of this incident, what kind of unfair treatment was this? Why were they only threatening to arrest him? Harry should also be taken away. Otherwise, wouldn't this be favoritism? When June heard his question, the corner of her mouth curled up and she squinted her eyes menacingly at him, causing him to grimace in pain. You don't get to question what we do. Your past matters have been investigated. You don't need me to tell you what you have done. We know the trouble you cause. June rambled on. Howie did not know what she was talking about. He felt nervous. They were a bunch of gangsters in the school. They had done a lot of bad things. It was hard to know what she knew. Thinking about it now, he immediately broke out in a cold sweat, looking at June's fierce scowl. Howie was so scared that he didn't dare to say another word. June waved her hand, and the people from the Wolf Guard took all these punks and prepared to take them away. Who knew that these punks would really believe such nonsense? All of them immediately cried out for their parents. Harry looked at the group of sobbing hooligans and laughed. These guys were so simple-minded that they believed whatever they said. Howie heard the familiar laughter and turned around to look at Harry. However, this time he wasn't in the mood to argue. The things they had done in the past had been exposed and they were being arrested. He didn't have time to argue with Harry. Seeing that so many gangsters were scared to the point of pissing their pants, Harry became even happier. When he saw Howie's dejected look as he was hauled away, Harry thought to himself that these gangsters were easy to fool. The bad things they had done were nothing more than petty crimes and they wouldn't be investigated. However, Howie and his group thought that they had all done big things before. They couldn't be allowed to keep following this path or something very bad would happen and it would be a huge mess. Harry's guards would take the gang out in the middle of nowhere to scare them and then let them go. As long as Harry's true identity was not exposed, there was no need to complicate things by involving police. After buying a drink from a nearby bar, Harry returned to the neighborhood as if nothing had happened. After an entire afternoon, Howie and the others who were taken away by June finally regained their freedom. When Harry went downstairs to the garbage, he happened to meet Howie, who had lost his soul and walked back alone. Harry asked in a mocking tone, "Yo, you're back. How's the remodeling going over there? Did you swear to be a good person from now on?" Howie was instantly enraged. "That was bull. I didn't do anything wrong at all. I was wrongly accused." "You were taken away in broad daylight. You said you were wronged. Who would believe that?" Harry said with a mocking tone. Howie was speechless. He couldn't help but shiver when he thought of the pain of being tortured for the whole afternoon. He thought in his heart, "I don't want to be captured by those people anymore. Those people are simply devils who torture people. They're too scary." Harry looked at Howie's frightened expression and wanted to laugh even more. Of course, he knew what Howie and the others had experienced in the afternoon. First, they were taken away by the Wolf Guard. Then each of them was locked up alone, and they were carefully greeted by 3 or 4 Wolf Guard. All kinds of methods except physical injuries were used on them. For example, in such hot weather, they were locked up in a small room that could not be ventilated. They were even grilled in the bathtub. The gangsters were all hot and dehydrated. Then, they had an ice bucket challenge. A large bucket of ice water was poured down from above their heads. They let Howie and the others experience what it meant to be ice and fire. That was not the end. What did they mean by tying them up and tickling them with feathers? One put on an eye patch and pretended to throw them down from the roof. In fact, he only threw them from a height of a few feet. They put on an earpiece, and using the highest volume released all kinds of ear-piercing noises, like the creaking sound of scratching glass. It was enough to make people go crazy. The Wolf Guard had a lot of fun with all kinds of torture methods. As for Howie and the group of punks, they were in a miserable state. They were almost crippled. Each and every one of them broke down. If it wasn't for the 1 hour before they were released, they would have been able to recover. Howie couldn't walk back on his own this time. He could only crawl back. Seeing Harry's mocking expression, Howie couldn't help but feel a fire of hatred burning in his heart. Unfortunately, he didn't have the confidence to deal with Harry alone, and his group of little brothers had been tortured to the point of being half dead. Now, facing all kinds of mockery from Harry, he could only swallow his anger. However, he still did not forgive him. "Don't laugh at me. I'll let you go today. Later, I'll continue to settle the score with you." Seeing that he wasn't very capable, the corner of Harry's mouth raised into a smile. He walked in front of Howie and looked down at him from above. What are you doing?" Howie asked nervously. Harry sneered and kicked Howie to the ground. "I don't have a bad temper. I'll give you a warning first. If you provoke me again, it won't be a matter of kicking you down. I'll beat you to a pulp." Harry glared and said. Howie was stunned. He didn't expect Harry to attack without even saying a word. Now it was a fight. Harry wasn't light at all. He kicked Howie in the chest, sending him a few feet away. Howie rolled on the ground a few times and felt a burning pain in his lungs. It was hard for him to breathe. He almost thought that he was going to suffocate. He opened his mouth and huffed hard for a long time before he could catch his breath. To be honest, Harry had wanted to teach him a lesson a long time ago. This kid relied on the love of his parents and bullied Michaela quite often. In the past, Michaela had no one to love her and support her, but now it was different. Harry, her biological brother, had come. Although they had not officially recognized each other, the blood relation was obvious. Since he had already confirmed that she was his sister, how could Harry tolerate others bullying her? Therefore, Harry didn't like Howie no matter what. If it wasn't for his concern for Michaela, he would have long wanted to teach this ignorant fellow a lesson. Now he had kicked him just to get a little revenge for his sister. Harry felt refreshed when he saw Howie rolling and crawling all over the ground. He felt really good. It felt really good to stand up for his sister, but unfortunately, it was not thorough enough. Harry did not make it clear who he was. He hid it and did not let Michaela see it. He regretted that. Harry thought that he should let Howie go for now and wait until after recognizing Michaela as his sister. Keep your eyes open from now on. This world doesn't revolve around you and not everything is yours. You can't bully people, Harry warned before turning around and returning upstairs. As for whether Howie listened or not, Harry didn't care. Howie only dared to stand up after Harry left. His eyes didn't show any signs of being taught a lesson. Instead, they were filled with hatred. In his eyes, Harry was just a poor worker from a foreign land. What right did he have to show off in front of a local like him? Now that Howie had suffered under Harry's hands, he was even more furious. He swore to himself that the humiliation he had suffered today, he would definitely return to Harry another day. As for now, Howie knew his own limitations. He couldn't defeat Harry. He thought to himself that a man should know when to yield and when to fight. He would wait for another day when all his brothers had recovered. He would then look for Harry to teach him a lesson and make him understand that an outsider could not do as he pleased in this place. Howie thought about this with hatred in his heart. He stood up and touched the place where Harry had kicked him. Immediately, he grimaced in pain and limped back to his home. Harry returned to his rented house. He had nothing to do, so he played with the computer to pass the time. When it was almost nighttime, he stood on the balcony and waited for Michaela to come back from school. Seeing Michaela return on her bicycle as usual, Harry smiled in satisfaction. He did not plan to go out and meet Michaela yet. He would wait until they had something to talk about. As Harry stood by the balcony and quietly watched his sister go home, he was already very satisfied. But after a while, Harry frowned again. Harry heard Michaela quarreling with her family. She seemed very angry and felt wronged. Harry felt irritated when he heard the noise next door. His sister's family was really not that great. They were indeed very stingy with Michaela. She was clearly such a beautiful girl, but her family would not treat anyone as a treasure. Michaela's mother and stepfather just looked at her like a burden. They did not like her at all. Hearing the increasingly intense noise next door, Harry could not sit still anymore. He originally wanted to go over and support Michaela. However, Harry stopped after 2 steps. He thought for a while. If he went over now, it would be too sudden, and he did not have a suitable excuse to intervene in Michaela's family dispute. If he did not reveal his true identity, it would be very difficult to help Michaela. Instead, it would only add fuel to the fire and harm her. Thinking of this, Harry hesitated. He felt that there was no need to act immediately. The most important thing was to figure out what had happened over there. While Harry was thinking, the noise next door quieted down. Not long after, the lights in the room were turned off. It looked like they had all gone to bed. Harry stood in his room, quietly thinking about what kind of method he should use to reveal his identity to Michaela. But no matter how he thought about it, he still felt that it wasn't the right time yet. If he suddenly told Michaela that he was her brother, it would not be a surprise, but a shock. Harry lit up his cigarette in annoyance and started smoking. He smoked a few long pulls in a row, but he still did not know how to deal with Michaela's family. It was difficult to avoid family matters. The internal conflicts within the family were the most difficult to reconcile. No matter how capable Harry was, he still felt that it was troublesome. Although it was not impossible to forcefully take Michaela away, This was Michaela's home after all, and there was still her birth mother to consider. No matter how bad the relationship between Michaela and the birth mother was, she was still her mother, and no one could replace her. Harry wasn't sure if Michaela would leave with him after he revealed his identity. If she wasn't willing, then Harry couldn't do anything about it. At this moment, Harry heard the sound of a door opening. He looked through the peephole and saw Michaela walking out with her head lowered. She leaned against the handrail of the stairs and slowly sat down. Not long after, Harry saw Michaela's shoulders twitching non-stop. There was also the sound of suppressed crying. This time Harry could not stay any longer. He immediately pushed open the door and walked out. The sound of movement behind her startled Michaela. She turned around and saw that Harry had walked out. Michaela let out a slight sigh of relief. But the next moment she thought about how she was a mess from crying. It was too embarrassing for Harry to see. She quickly wiped away her tears and pretended to be fine as she asked, "What are you doing out here? It's so late. Shouldn't you be in bed?" Harry looked at his sister, forcing a smile, and his heart broke. "No need to wipe your tears. I heard you guys arguing. Can you tell me what happened?" Harry handed Michaela a tissue. Michaela thanked him in a low voice. She wiped her nose and said, "Did the noise in my house disturb you? I'm so sorry." Harry shook his head. "No, I haven't slept yet." "Is that so? But I have disturbed you. Please don't pay any attention to us." Michaela was lost in her thoughts. When she talked to Harry, she seemed distracted. Harry looked at her and felt his heart ache more and more. "You had a fight with your family, right? If you don't mind, you can tell me about it. Maybe you will feel better." Michaela heard Harry's words and crossed her arms over her knees. She put her chin on her knees and looked at the moonlight outside the window. She was speechless for a moment. Harry walked to Michaela's side and said, "You don't mind if I sit here?" No, I don't mind." Michaela was stunned for a moment. She moved her butt to the side and made space for Harry. "If you feel wrong, just say it. It might help to talk about it," Harry said with concern. Michaela lowered her head even more and snorted in a low voice. "It's very awkward to talk about what happened just now. It's also very embarrassing." Harry was silent and speechless. In the end, the two of them were still too unfamiliar. They had only met a few times and they don't know each other well. Michaela's family had problems and she wasn't close enough to Harry to tell him about them. This made Harry feel sad and uncomfortable. He really wanted to tell Michaela right now that he was her biological brother. If someone bullied her, he would make sure it never happened again. However, Harry couldn't do that right now. He couldn't explain their relationship without any preparation. Michaela probably would not believe it. The two of them sat together on the stairs in the corridor and were silent. After a long while, Michaela faintly sighed and said, "All right, maybe it is better to talk about it. It's really uncomfortable to hold it inside." Harry said with relief, "That's right. Don't worry and tell me. I promise I won't tell anyone else." Michaela smiled bitterly and said, "It's like this. My family wants me to have sort of an arranged marriage, marry some older man after I graduate from high school." "What?" Harry turned pale with fright. "How old are you? Your family wants you to marry? Who are you marrying?" Harry quickly asked. Michaela said angrily, "They said they want me to get married to someone older and established who can take care of me, but it's actually the same as selling me off. They just don't want the expense of having a kid." Harry silently clenched his fists, and the hatred in his heart towards that family became even greater. His sister was only 17 years old, and it was time for college entrance exams, not marriage. Her academic records were pretty good, and she was an exceptional young lady who could do anything she wanted. "Then you definitely won't be willing." Harry said some nonsense. Michaela said, "Of course I don't want to. I know I will get married sooner or later, but not now, to someone I don't even know and for nothing but money." Harry nodded. "Then what are you going to do?" Michaela was confused. "I don't know. My original plan was to do well on college entrance exams and get a scholarship. Then I would be able to leave this place on my own and never look back." "Don't you have any attachment to this home?" Harry asked in surprise. Initially, he was worried that Michaela would not leave with him after he confessed his identity to her. Now he realized that she already had the idea of getting rid of this family. "I don't belong here and they don't care about me. I wanted to leave a long time ago," Michaela said without hesitation. Harry got excited, thinking to himself, "I am your brother. Come with me." The truth was stuck in his throat. Harry wished he could leave with Michaela now. However, before he could say anything, they were interrupted as the door of Michaela's house was pushed open. As the door was pushed open, The voice control light in the corridor lit up again. It was Howie who came out. When he saw Harry and Michaela sitting side by side on the stairs, he immediately scowled as if he was catching an adulterous woman and shouted, "Ha! I knew you didn't sleep in the middle of the night. Why did you sneak out? Looks like you've been having an affair with someone. I caught you." Harry's disgust towards Howie was getting stronger and stronger. However, he had to be close to Michaela, so it was not good for him to be cruel. "You better shut your mouth. How could you say that about your own sister?" Harry questioned. Howie sneered and said, "Don't pretend to be serious here. From the moment you moved next door, I could tell you were thinking about Michaela. In your dreams, you're a poor old man. Forget about it." Michaela saw that Howie's words became more and more unpleasant, and she angrily stood up and said, "Howie, Harry and I are just ordinary friends. Don't make it ugly." "Oh, so your name is Harry. You two are already so familiar with each other when you just moved here, and you are friends? Who are you trying to fool?" Howie did not believe it at all. He looked at Michaela and said with a sneer on his face, "Just now I heard you swear you would go to college and not get married, and now you're having a private meeting with someone. I will call my parents now." "Don't!" Michaela exclaimed in shock. Howie did not care about what she said. He opened his mouth and was ready to shout. But Harry wouldn't give him the opportunity. Although he was not afraid of her parents, it was not good to cause chaos in the middle of the night. Therefore, Harry made a prompt decision and went forward to chop Howie's neck with the butt of a knife. Instantly, Howie stopped being arrogant and rolled his eyes before falling down. Michaela looked at Harry in horror and asked, You killed him?" Harry shook his head and said, "I just knocked him out. Don't worry, let him make a big fuss. Try to get some rest tonight." Michaela nodded and agreed. "Is he all right? Will there be any lasting damage?" Harry looked at her and asked, "Why? He treated you like this and you still care about him?" At this moment, Harry had mixed feelings. The relationship between the three of them was a bit messy. Harry and Michaela were siblings who shared the same father and different mothers, and Michaela and Howie were siblings who shared the same mother and different fathers. As the blood bond between the three of them, the center was naturally Michaela. Harry and Howie had no relationship. However, seeing Michaela ask about Howie with such concern, Harry definitely felt uncomfortable. Unexpectedly, Michaela shook her head and said, "No, I'm worried that if something goes wrong with him, it will bring you trouble." Harry immediately felt relieved. It turned out that she was still thinking of him. The knot in his heart eased. "Don't worry, he isn't a problem," Harry said with a smile. With Howie's interruption, they could not continue their conversation. Looking at the time, Harry said, "It's getting late. You should go and rest. Don't think too much about it. Trust me, your situation will turn for the better very soon." Michaela did not understand Harry's words. Her parents had already decided what was going to happen. What other turn of events could there be? She only thought that Harry was saying comforting words. Michaela nodded her head and thanked him. "I have troubled you again today. I'm embarrassed to keep causing trouble for you." Harry smiled and said, "It is my duty to help you. After all, you have helped me a lot." Michaela faintly sighed. "I really want to leave now." "Hmm? What did you say?" Harry did not hear clearly. Michaela shook her head and said, "Nothing. You should get some rest too." After saying that, she bent down and prepared to carry Howie home. But Michaela wasn't strong enough and couldn't move Howie. Harry thought it would be best if this trash was thrown out and ignored. However, seeing Michaela struggle, he stepped forward to help. It was late at night and it was not good for Harry to enter Michaela's house, so he suggested, "Just leave this guy behind the door. If you don't teach him a lesson, he won't know how to respect people." Michaela thought about it and agreed. Harry threw Howie in the house next to the bathroom. He let Howie lie on the ground and didn't care. In any case, there wouldn't be any danger after the door was closed. It was quite satisfying to let this guy lie on the ground for the whole night. Harry said goodbye to Michaela and returned to his place. After standing on the balcony and watching Michaela's bedroom light go off, he could sleep soundly. The next day, Harry woke up early in the morning and followed Michaela without her noticing. He watched her leave the neighborhood and enter the school. Everything was as usual. Only then did Harry feel at ease and leave. He went to the temporary housing where June and the other guards were stationed. June saw that Harry was frowning. She asked, "Sir, is there something troubling you?" Harry sighed. "It's about last night. I didn't think Michaela's stepfather and mother would go so far." June obviously knew what happened last night. As Harry's personal bodyguard, she would not let Harry leave her sight. The corridor last night seemed to be quiet, but June and the wolf guard were hiding nearby. As for the conversation between Harry and Michaela, these guards naturally heard it too. Harry didn't care about that. What annoyed him was that he still didn't know how to tell Michaela about their true relationship. In Michaela's opinion, her family's plans were the shackles that bound her. It was basically impossible for her to break free. But in Harry's eyes, this was nothing. He could easily help her. But Harry had no way to do it now. If he couldn't reveal his identity, then there was no reason for him to openly interfere in Michaela's family matters. Therefore, Harry was very troubled. June said, "Sir, I think you are lost in the situation." "Oh, what do you have in mind? Tell me." After so many days of fear, every one of Harry's subordinates was extremely anxious. Without Harry, they had no direction. They worried that he would never return and their lives would take a turn for the worse. These days, not only were they afraid for Harry's safety, but they were also feeling very aggrieved in their hearts. The Hugh family was the one who took Harry away. They knew who they could direct their anger towards. However, they couldn't fight back against the enemy for the time being, and they had to wait patiently. They wished they could rush at the Hugh family and eliminate these horrible people as soon as possible. Now that Harry had finally returned, his subordinates weren't only excited, but also filled with hatred towards the other family. The airship continued to follow the designated route in the sky above Savage Mountain. Along the way, it met up with other teams that had been searching for Harry's whereabouts. After all the teams had gathered, it was time to leave the Savage Mountain area. However, it wasn't easy to enter and exit Savage Mountain. June had studied the terrain and environment of the mountain during this period of time and found that Savage Mountain was actually part of a large basin surrounded by mountains and rivers. In the middle of the basin, the mountain was shorter, and the surroundings were filled with towering stone formations. Coupled with the unpredictable climate and the abnormal magnetic field inside, the mountain was basically isolated from the outside world. Entering the mountain was easy enough with the right equipment. Leaving was a whole different problem. They couldn't just pick any random direction. The biggest obstacle wasn't the terrain here, but the complex and ever-changing weather. The magnetic field inside the mountain was abnormal, causing all sorts of positioning and electronic equipment to malfunction. Many hikers had lost their bearings on this mountain and were left wandering the forest till they ran out of food. Unfortunately, even using the sun for direction would become ineffective. The Savage Mountain was covered by fog all year round. However, in the mountain area around Savage Mountain, the fog was pervading the air all year round, and visibility was no more than 10 feet. Even if they used their airship to fly in the sky, it would be impossible to pass through the fog. The fog extended from the ground all the way to a very high altitude in the sky. Harry's airships couldn't fly high enough to get over the fog. June bought the airships, only caring if they would work so she could quickly rescue Harry. She hadn't planned for the harsh environment around Savage Mountain and couldn't modify any of the airships. The airship's maximum flying height was limited to begin with. Only a few of the largest airships ever built could fly high enough to avoid the fog. Harry's dozen or so airships were currently hovering at the edge of the fog, discussing ways to leave through their staticky radio communication. The fuel of the cruisers was limited. They couldn't stay at Savage Mountain for an indefinite period of time, and it would be best if they could successfully leave on the first try. They had supplies for more attempts, but Harry wanted to get home quickly. He had to go back to take charge of his people. June left to look at the map. When George and the others were at their wits' end, Callie made a suggestion. "I think there is still a way to differentiate directions in the thick fog." The airship could be piloted in a straight line, but was subject to the wind and could be blown off course. This was the issue that June and the other team captains were trying to solve. They only needed to figure out a strategy to fly in one direction and not deviate from that path. Any shift in their course might lead them deeper into the fog, and they could end up lost with no way to get home. Everyone was also worried about this matter, but they didn't expect Callie to think of a solution. "Whatever it is, just say it," Harry said happily. Callie had never disappointed him. Along the way, she had proven to be a very capable woman. Callie took out a piece of superconductive ore that she had collected from a corner of the cabin and explained to Harry, "You can use this. The magnetic field inside the mountain will interfere with the compass and other equipment, but it has an effect on the superconductive ore." As Callie explained the method, the eyes of the others gradually lit up. This kind of naturally formed superconductive ore acted like its own compass to the other ore that was deep inside the mountain. Using it as a reference would help them navigate the thick fog. No one else had been able to escape Savage Mountain because they didn't know about the superconductive ore. If it wasn't for Harry and the others accidentally discovering the underground space where superconductive ores were hidden, they might never have been able to leave. Callie's idea was very simple. She filled an empty can box with water and tied a small piece of superconductive ore with a string and placed it inside. Observing that the superconductive ore would tilt in a certain direction, she would be able to know which direction was the direction they came from. She essentially replaced a normal compass with this superconductive ore that would naturally point toward the larger source of ore. Only special materials like superconductive ores could ignore the disorder of the magnetic field around the mountain and be used to navigate without any technology. They didn't have enough ore to supply each ship with Callie's new compass. They needed to stay close together while Harry's ship led the way. Before Harry and the others set off, they first landed all the airships on the ground and tied them up with ropes. After they took off again, Harry's airship took the lead, and the other airships followed the rope and moved forward. Using the superconductive ore to guide the way, they flew through the thick fog. They resisted all kinds of wind and lightning with great difficulty. After flying for a day and a half, they started to see clear skies. They successfully arrived in the sky outside the fog of Savage Mountain. The airships appeared out of the fog one by one, carrying Harry and all the search teams that went looking for him. When all the airships flew to the sky above the makeshift station, Harry discovered that there were tens of thousands of people gathered around a simple airport below. When these people saw the airships return, they all cheered. When the airships started to land, these people ran towards them and took the ropes that were thrown down by the crews. They then tied the ropes to anchors in the ground, making sure the airships would stay on the ground. After the airship landed and stopped, Harry walked out of the cabin and found that all the people who came running to help had familiar faces. All the girls who were close to Harry were here along with a lot of his subordinates. Celeste, Kiki, Tammy, and Juniper all rushed over with tears in their eyes when they saw Harry. Barry and Felton were about to open their arms and pounce on him when Stephen told them to sit down. Harvey and Randy stood at the side with smiles on their faces. They waited for Harry to greet everyone else before they would walk up and welcome him back. "Why are you all here?" Harry asked with a smile. Harvey said, "You were in trouble. How can we not come to your rescue? We came after we found out June went to find you." Randy was filled with righteous indignation. "Harry, the Hugh family dared to kidnap you. If it wasn't for Harvey stopping me, I would have ordered my men to attack them." "That makes me happy." Harry was touched. Harvey frowned and said, "The Hugh family has gone too far this time." Harry's expression was solemn and he remained silent. He knew he had to deal with the Hugh family. For now, he was just happy to be back among friends. Harry would have to clean up and form a plan of action. He had to make his next moves very carefully. The Hugh family had directly threatened his life, and they would have to pay dearly for their actions. Harvey and Randy had been waiting for word that Harry was safe. Meanwhile, they had been preparing their men to attack the Hugh family. Mr. Cross walked through the crowd and greeted them. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need me to arrange a place for you to rest?" Harry waved his hand and said, "Yes, I am all right. There was no need for that. Mr. Cross, you have been working hard recently." "It's not hard to work, sir, but the Hugh family has caused us a lot of trouble. During the time we were waiting for you, the Hugh family had sent a lot of people to attack. If it wasn't for Harvey and Randy, things would have been really bad." Mr. Cross told Harry about some of the things that had happened while he was away. The more Harry listened, the angrier he became. Not only did the Hugh family send people into the inner area of Savage Mountain to chase after him, they also didn't stay idle outside the mountain. Taking advantage of the fact that Harry's men were all searching for him and left many of Harry's assets undefended, the Hugh family launched wave after wave of attacks. Not only did they try to save Fallon, but they also wanted to take over Harry's territory. They wanted to make sure Harry had nothing left to his name if he ever escaped the mountain. Without the support of the territory, even if Harry still had his subordinates, it would be useless. Before long, his heart would disperse and he would become a loner. The Hugh family's evil intentions made Harry burn with anger. If it wasn't for Harvey and Randy's help, perhaps the Hugh family would have succeeded. "You two have really helped me a lot this time. I don't know how to thank you two," Harry said to Harvey and Randy once again. "Harry, we're brothers after all. This is what we should do. Besides, we still have shares in Reflecting Moon Island. The Hugh family would have to go through us if they wanted to take it for themselves," Harvey said. Randy was an impatient man. When he saw that Harry had returned safely, he didn't want to delay any longer. He said, Harry, let's gather all our men and attack the Hugh family. That old man Xander. If I don't rip off his head, I won't be able to look you in the eye anymore. Harry, I would also like to join in with my own men. A voice that surprised Harry came from behind. Harry turned his head and saw Vicky from the Crocodile Society. Harry asked in surprise, "Why are you here?" He really didn't expect to see Vicky. Vicky was the one who had personally captured him. The Hugh family was the one who hired her to do their bidding. Although Harry had reached an agreement with Vicky previously, Harry had been able to escape into the mountain. Therefore, the relationship between Harry and Vicky was very difficult. Harry's subordinates would see Vicky as an enemy. Vicky walked toward Harry and stood in front of him before she said, "Previously, we were entrusted by the Hugh family to capture you and cause some misunderstandings, but we didn't intend to make you our enemy." Randy said impatiently, "You kidnapped Harry because someone paid you to do it. How can you act like you did nothing wrong?" Harry saw that Randy was very annoyed, but he wanted to hear Vicky out. Vicky had shown up and wasn't stopped when she tried to get close to Harry. Harry knew that she wasn't here to welcome him back. She was here to strike a deal with Harry. "Just tell me why you are here," Harry said in a flat tone. He had promised Vicky that he would give her $2 billion if her people brought him back. However, since his own people rescued him, their previous deal was no longer useful. Of course, Vicky wouldn't ask Harry for this sum of money. She knew that she had missed the opportunity on that deal. Harry wasn't someone the Crocodile Society could strong-arm. "Mr. Parker, you are still as straightforward as ever. I won't beat around the bush anymore. Would you like to hire me to attack the Hugh family? Take it as an apology for kidnapping you." Vicky told him the reason for her visit. Harry frowned slightly. Randy even spat and refuted. "You're only here because you know the Hugh family is going to be destroyed. You just want to make money. No way." Vicky wasn't angered by Randy's impolite treatment. She just smiled at Harry, waiting for his reply. Harry kept silent. Harvey continued, "Vicky, you said you want to take the lead to deal with the Hugh family. I don't think it's that simple. I think you see an opportunity to make a quick buck, right?" Harvey was more mature than Randy. His words hit the nail on the head. In fact, Vicky didn't avoid this question anymore. She generously admitted to it. She smiled and said to Harry, "Yes, after all, I'm the leader of a powerful organization. I won't do anything without some kind of profit. I see it as a golden opportunity for us to make sure that the Hugh family pays for what they have done to Harry. That and my organization needs the funds and you need the manpower." Harry nodded his head. "Vicky, you are a very straightforward person. I admire your character." She didn't hide anything with her words. She spoke the truth, and this made Harry think highly of Vicky. Although the relationship between the two of them was very rocky, he could admire her for her honesty. The Crocodile Society was only a third party who took the money to do the bidding of the Hugh family. They did what they were asked, and nothing more. Harry learned that none of his men were killed when he was kidnapped, which spoke highly of Vicky's morality. After capturing Harry, she still wanted to take money, so she offered to save him for a large fee. She didn't have any moral integrity or professional ethics when she was done with the deal. She only cared about money. Harry didn't care that she would backstab a previous client for money. Knowing that Vicky was only interested in money, Harry began to forgive her for kidnapping him. In the end, it was the Hugh family's fault. The source of all his problems was the Hugh family. Therefore, Harry couldn't blame Vicky for every injustice against himself. Harry was tempted by her suggestion. After all, the Hugh family was a family with a huge foundation. War was unavoidable. Harry wanted to get revenge on the family that tried to kill him. Harry had enough people under him that he could deal with the Hugh family, but with a substantial amount of losses. Harry still attached great importance to the lives of his people. Now he had the opportunity to pay someone else to take on the risk for him. Harry was tempted. When the fighting was all done, the Crocodile Society would want a reward suitable for their efforts. Harry would have to give a portion of the Hugh family's wealth to them as compensation. The Hugh family had a lot of resources. After so many years, the wealth that was displayed on the surface was only the tip of the iceberg. No one knew how many hidden treasures the Hugh family had in their possession. Harry didn't care about their money. Harry's family was more wealthy than any family or company in the world. He only wanted to rid the world of the Hugh family. Now that he was faced with Vicky's request, Harry immediately smiled. "I like you a lot. I say it's a deal. We can decide the specifics when the fighting is over." Harry nodded very quickly, exceeding everyone's expectations. Vicky was very surprised, and Harry's friends and subordinates were even more surprised. Randy exclaimed, "Harry?" Harvey also advised, "The Hugh family has a lot of property and money. Harry, you can't just let this woman and her goons come in and steal everything." Harry's subordinates wanted to persuade him to take back his promise, but Harry had already made up his mind. He said to everyone, "You don't need to tell me. I have made up my mind." Then he said to Vicky again, "Since you are willing to fight for me, then I want you to use all of your men. I want to see that you are fully invested in this deal. Got it?" Vicky replied with a smile. "Of course, but regarding the distribution of benefits, we need to discuss them first before I send my men in." Harry raised his hand and said, "As long as you leave the buildings intact, you can take anything that isn't bolted down." With that said, Vicky's eyes lit up like light bulbs. She could just imagine the amount of wealth hidden behind the walls of the Hugh family manor. Then she got goosebumps thinking about all the other properties they owned and all the money she could make off of them. She only had to get her men to attack the Hugh family, and Harry would do his part. Then she would be able to fund the Crocodile Society for 7 or 8 years. Although the Hugh family had a lot of fixed assets, Vicky didn't have the intention to take them away. She only wanted the items she could easily pawn or deposit into her organization's own bank account. Then what about the other families that are partnered with the Hugh family? Vicky's appetite grew bigger. Although the affiliated families of the Hugh family weren't big enough to be a problem, they were still meat no matter how small the mosquito meat was. With so many small families gathered together, it wouldn't be a small amount of wealth to be gained from them. Harry casually waved his hand and said, "It's all the same to me. You can do whatever you want with them." Vicky could no longer maintain her aloof character. She was so excited that her entire body trembled uncontrollably. She said loudly, "I will go back now and gather all of my men. We will immediately launch an attack on the enemy." Vicky couldn't delay any longer. Vicky also knew that staying around might not be the best idea. Harry was agreeable to her request, but his subordinates weren't. Vicky said goodbye. "Then I will see you later, Harry." Harry nodded. "I look forward to watching your men fight." Vicky immediately left. She boarded her private plane and departed. Harry couldn't tell where she was headed. He figured she would disguise her movements so her organization's whereabouts would be hidden. After sending Vicky, Randy was very dissatisfied and said to Harry, "My friend, why did you agree to her request so easily? The Hugh family has such a large amount of money. Why did you agree to give her so much?" Harry said with a smile, "I did it for her manpower. Besides, the money means nothing to me." What he found hard to accept was that his subordinates who were monitoring them had given him a definite answer. Harry had been rescued. His people had confirmed that Harry had been on one of the airships. They had another piece of bad news. Once the airship landed and they had confirmed Harry's identity, he was greeted by the Crocodile Society with Vicky and the welcoming party. Xander didn't want to think about it any further. Vicky was the leader of the Crocodile Society. She valued money more than she valued influence. Being two-faced was a death sentence for Xander, while Vicky was happy to make deals with both sides of a conflict. Previously, they had been ordered by the Hugh family to capture Harry. After a small negotiation over price, the Crocodile Society fulfilled their end of the bargain. Now that Vicky had taken the money from the Hugh family and completed her task, her organization had nothing to do with the Hugh family anymore. Now she was happily welcoming Harry back and presumably was going to offer her services to him. Xander could only plan for the worst. He immediately gathered all his men and brought them to his family manor to prepare for an attack. "Master, there is still no movement from Harry's forces, and we can't see any movement from his friends either," the butler reported to Xander. These past few days, Xander had been very careful, making sure that the core property of the family was well protected, making sure his men were ready and they had plenty of ammunition and supplies for any future battle. He had also been keeping a close eye on Harry's movements, trying to predict when he would attack and what he would use his men against his family. "What about his other assets?" Xander asked. "We've seen no movement from the Reflecting Moon Island. As for the Livingston family and Banner family, they don't seem to be preparing for any conflict," the butler replied. "What about the Crocodile Society?" Xander continued asking. Xander didn't believe that Harry wouldn't take his revenge on his family. Their two families were already at war. Harry had just been hunted after being captured and locked in a remote mountain. Harry had to be furious and willing to do anything to make Xander's family pay. The butler said with some concern, "The problem is the Crocodile Society. These few days my men have found that the areas where these people are usually active have become quiet, as if they all vanished into thin air." Xander immediately became anxious. "They have disappeared? What do you mean? They have thousands of people in their organization. You tell me that all of them have disappeared without a trace and no one knows where they went?" The butler immediately lowered his head. "Yes, sir." Xander was furious. He had nowhere to vent his anger. He wanted to scold the butler. The butler had been assisting his family loyally for decades. He had proven himself time and time again. Now he seemed to be failing in his old age. Knowing his track record and the nature of the situation, he couldn't be blamed for this bad news. Xander suppressed his anger. He opened his mouth and said, "Increase your efforts. Use our contacts to see if they have picked up any information. I don't care how much money you spend, you must find these people." "You think the Crocodile Society and Harry are in cahoots?" the butler asked. "Humph, it's a certainty. You should know what kind of people the Crocodile Society are. Harry probably paid them already," Xander said angrily. How could he not want to work with the Crocodile Society? They had captured him so effortlessly. Xander considered what Harry would have been thinking when he spoke with Vicky. After all, if the family was still intact, no matter how much money they lost, they could still earn it back eventually. He also considered hiring the Crocodile Society. Bribing them would almost guarantee that Harry couldn't retaliate. Problem was, he couldn't contact anyone in the organization to set up a deal. After Vicky and Harry had reached an agreement, the Crocodile Society had disappeared and gathered around the Hugh family manor in secret. It was very difficult to hide a large number of people in the Hugh family territory. The foot traffic was low enough that a large influx of people would be noticed, but large enough that small groups could infiltrate without attracting too much attention. This was the same thing that happened during their operation to capture Harry. They had been using fake IDs and had multiple different alibis. Once they were given the order, the men from the Crocodile Society would drop their disguises and spring into action. When Xander was searching for the people of the Crocodile Society, he didn't know that these people had already hidden themselves among his own companies and territories. When all her people were in position, Vicky arrived to take command. Harry didn't care when the attack happened. As long as she attacked his enemy, Harry would immediately follow up with his own forces. The Crocodile Society was the vanguard of the attack. This put them at the greatest risk and would take the brunt of the casualties head-on. Vicky cared more about the wealth she was promised if her organization succeeded than she was worried about her men being injured or killed. Harry only wanted the destruction of the Hugh family. Vicky wasn't blinded by greed, however. She knew that there were members in her organization that were opposed to her leadership. They had been gathering in secret to overthrow her position as leader. She hoped that in the coming battles that some, if not all, of these traitors would be killed. The composition of the Crocodile Society's members was very complicated. There were all kinds of people in the Crocodile Society, and most of them were desperate criminals. The former leader had left the majority of his loyal members in the organization. Many people openly admitted that Vicky was in power, but they were very dissatisfied with letting a woman be their leader. Therefore, cleansing the Crocodile Society was something Vicky had always wanted to do, but she couldn't do it openly. If she purged those who were dissatisfied with her leadership for no reason, then Vicky would either be overthrown by her subordinates or the Crocodile Society would disband. The two outcomes were unacceptable to Vicky, so she wanted to use this opportunity to attack the Hugh family to clean up the Crocodile Society of possible dissenters. By doing so, she could use the money from the attack to reorganize the Crocodile Society. After that, she could also obtain a lot of wealth. Even after the dust settled, those subordinates who were dissatisfied with her wouldn't say anything after seeing the huge amount of money they would earn. More often than not, she could solve most of their internal strife with secret payoffs. She maintained her power through bribes. It was the only way to control her greedy members. She was trying to kill two birds with one stone. As for whether the attack on the Hugh family would fail, Vicky was confident in her men and Harry. With the Crocodile Society as the vanguard and Harry's forces as the support, the Hugh family's defeat was destined. She was still worried that Harry was going to go back on his word and try to take her organization and the Hugh family at the same time. Harry knew very well about conflicts like this. He would rather not take the chance that a significant portion of his men could be killed. His vendetta wasn't about money. Harry only wanted to see the end of the Hugh family. However, the others didn't understand Harry. From their point of view, he would have taken control of the Hugh family and added their assets to his own. It was the only way that made sense to them. Harvey also advised, Harry, I don't think it's right. It would be very easy for the three of us to take down the Hugh family together. Why should we give the opportunity to that woman? Harry patiently explained. In my opinion, my goal isn't their money. The safety of my people is more important. Since the Crocodile Society is willing to risk their men, I say let them. Besides, I don't even have to spend a penny to make them do it. Harry's subordinates were touched when they heard that their boss cared so much about their lives. All of them nodded to show their loyalty to Harry. Sir, it is our duty to serve you. You don't have to worry about us. Harry smiled. All right, all right. I know you all mean it. There's no need to risk your lives. Everyone has worked hard to save me. Let's head back home and rest. The next few days are going to be long and hard. George asked, What about the Hugh family? Harry said, Let the Crocodile Society act first. We will wait for them to attack. Yes, sir. The group of subordinates received the order in unison. Randy and Harvey looked at Harry. Both of them understood why Harry made such a deal with the Crocodile Society. When they thought it over, they thought it was a good deal. Randy and Harvey had no intention of coveting the fortune of the Hugh family. They only wanted to help Harry. Harry had just gotten back to safety. His subordinates wanted to welcome him back with a party. However, Harry was already very tired after the bumpy journey, so he left everyone to go rest. Xander hadn't received any news from his subordinates who had been in the mountain for a long time. Before they all went in, Xander got reports from his men intermittently. Once they all entered the fog, he heard nothing. However, he wasn't optimistic. Harry left almost no tracks, and any trace of him was well hidden. His men began encountering their own problems on the mountain while they searched. Some teams would lose a few members to the terrain and other teams would be lost entirely. Xander lost his patience. He sent another team that was larger than all the rest to clear a path deep into the wilderness. The moment this group of people entered the heart of the mountain, all communications were cut off. For many days, they didn't receive any reply from the large team. They didn't even know whether they were dead or alive, let alone whether they had found Harry. Xander couldn't sit still anymore after losing contact with all of his men. He didn't dare to continue filling the bottomless pit of the mountain with his people. The Hugh family's strength wasn't unlimited. After suffering losses, Xander began to think about how to end this matter quickly. Harry had a lot of assets that he had left undefended while they were searching for him. Unfortunately, Xander didn't find any success in his attacks either. Fallon was also unable to be saved. The series of failures had made Xander very frustrated. He now knew that two new forces had been defending Harry's territory. It was the Livingston family and the Banner family who had placed their men strategically at Harry's territories. However, these two families were only limited to defending Harry's territory, and no outsiders could take advantage of the power vacuum. They were focused on defending and made no move to attack Xander's people. This made Xander heave a sigh of relief. If the Livingston family and the Banner family attacked with all their strength, it would be really difficult for the Hugh family to deal with them right now. Xander sent some of his men to collect information on these two families and found that they owned shares of the Reflecting Moon Island. This was something Xander had never expected. If he wanted to attack the Reflecting Moon Island, he would provoke these two families. He sent people to negotiate with the Livingston family and Banner family. He wanted these two families to give up on protecting Harry and work for the Hugh family instead. Unfortunately, all the people he sent were rejected at the door. Xander began to feel very isolated. He was worried that if Harry was lost on Savage Mountain, he wouldn't be able to come out again. Could it be that the Livingston family and Banner family were planning to join forces and divide the wealth left by Harry? That was why they refused to let the Hugh family interfere? He thought. In Xander's opinion, this was very likely. If he was the one who put himself in their shoes, he would also do the same. What he didn't know was that the situation was exactly the opposite of what he had expected. The Livingston family and the Banner family weren't after Harry's wealth, but were protecting his assets while he was gone. The two of them didn't believe that Harry wouldn't return from Savage Mountain. Xander was in a deadlock for many days, waiting for any news to come back from his search teams. The subordinates he sent out to guard the outside of Savage Mountain sent him a piece of shocking news. Harry survived and was rescued. The airships that entered the mountain fog and returned intact with Harry on board their lead ship. Xander knew about the airships and their plan to search for Harry from the sky. He never believed they would actually succeed. He originally thought that they would all be lost or a couple of airships would come back in pieces and would have lost most of their crew. However, without exception, they had all emerged relatively unscathed. How did they get in and out? How was this possible? Xander thought. Xander was stunned when he received this news. However, after interacting with Harry a couple of times, Vicky noticed that Harry was a very straightforward person. He did things openly and honorably, and never played tricks on others. Hence, Vicky decided to take a gamble, and bet that Harry wouldn't stab her in the back. Even if Harry were to sit and watch the Crocodile Society and the Hugh family fight until both sides suffered heavy losses, it didn't really matter to Vicky. If she could protect her core supporters and members, she would still be able to make a comeback. However, Vicky also believed that Harry wouldn't act so irrationally. Vicky had expressed her goodwill a few times to Harry. Vicky had reason to believe that their cooperation would definitely succeed. Taking down the Hugh family, Harry would have one less powerful enemy. The Crocodile Society would be able to operate and grow after they invested their newly found wealth. Both sides would benefit greatly from their cooperation. At this moment, the Crocodile Society was quietly hiding near the Hugh family manor, like a venomous snake hiding in the dark, staring at its prey. Finally, the news that everyone had gathered had arrived. Vicky wasn't willing to wait any longer and immediately ordered her people to attack. Xander was still thinking of ways to find the whereabouts of the Crocodile Society, and he didn't dare to let his men relax for even a second. Everyone in his manor was trembling with fear. They were afraid they would be killed. No one had expected that the people of the Crocodile Society would suddenly appear and attack them in such large numbers. Xander wasn't expecting a surprise attack so quickly. He had thought that even if the Crocodile Society and Harry joined forces, it would take them quite a long time to organize their attack. He expected that they would wait for him to lower his guard and then strike. Xander thought he could use the time when they were waiting for an opportunity to attack to start negotiations with the Crocodile Society. If Harry could make a deal with the Crocodile Society to attack him, Xander could bribe them to not attack. The moment the Crocodile Society launched their attack, Xander was at a loss for words. Fortunately, he had built a tight security net around his entire manor, so it was unlikely that he would be ambushed and caught unaware. The Crocodile Society had circumvented all of his defenses with ease. Xander was furious. The Crocodile Society, Vicky, I swear I will beat you to death. Xander, who was in the study, looked at the flames outside and said angrily, Master, the people of the Crocodile Society are here. You should go now. The butler tried to persuade him. Xander became even angrier. Why should I run? The Crocodile Society is just a bunch of losers. I will not be afraid of them. I'm going to stand here and watch these morons die in front of me. Xander didn't want to run and hide. He was confident in his men. He believed he could stay comfortable in his study and crush his attackers. The strength of the Hugh family wasn't something that could be easily shaken by the Crocodile Society. Vicky's forces had indeed crashed into their defenses. Most of the people who attacked first had lost their lives. The Hugh family is heavily guarded. We can't seem to break their defense. I think we should retreat. Vicky's men looked at the impenetrable defenses of the Hugh family and said in a frightened tone, he had fled from the front line to beg Vicky to retreat. However, Vicky shot him in the chest and watched as his body slumped onto the ground. She looked at the others with a cold expression. We are going to destroy the Hugh family. The others didn't expect the new boss to be so cruel. They were all shocked. Vicky saw that her intimidation had an effect and knew that she could only rely on her demonstration to deter others from fleeing. She was committed to her plan with Harry. She continued, Everyone knows how much wealth the Hugh family has. After we defeat them, those who want to make a fortune charge with me. How much wealth you can take will depend on if you can get me into that building. When she said this, all of her subordinates became like hungry wolves. They all felt like they were invincible and would be the first one into the building and they would be able to get the largest reward. The more they waited behind cover, the less of a chance they would have to line their pockets. Immediately, everyone from the Crocodile Society let out a loud cry. They no longer cared about how fierce the Hugh family's firepower was. They all rushed forward without a care for their lives. Of course, it was inevitable that they would suffer heavy casualties, but no one cared about their well-being. Those who died were unlucky. Those who didn't die would be rich beyond their wildest dreams. This was the way of survival for the people of the Crocodile Society. The risks were high, but so were the rewards. Vicky looked at her countless subordinates who had fallen on half of the road to attack the Hugh family. There was no expression of heartache on her face. Instead, she revealed a satisfied expression because the people who died weren't her family, nor were they her favorite. The Hugh family had just started to repel the attack of the Crocodile Society. They assumed that they could keep their defense up and that the Crocodile Society would fail to get past them. It was obvious that the Hugh family was heavily guarded right now, and they still wanted to knock their heads against the wall. However, before they could celebrate for long, the second wave of attack arrived. The people of the Hugh family were horrified to find out that they had barely seen the worst the Crocodile Society had in store. These people from the Crocodile Society were like madmen, charging forward without caring about their own lives. They were fearless. When faced with such a suicidal attack, the people from the Hugh family were instantly frightened. They were scared that no amount of wounds would stop the Crocodile Society from advancing. They seemed invincible. For a moment, the people of the Hugh family were caught off guard, and they were forced to retreat one step after another. As for Harry, he had a clear grasp of every single movement of the Crocodile Society. At this moment, he saw that the Hugh family couldn't hold on to their first line of defense any longer, and was gradually retreating. He smiled and said to June, "It's time for us to go." He waved his hand, and his subordinates, who were already on standby, immediately began to take action. On a runway in front of a few planes, the entire Wolf Guard had been deployed in a neat square formation. They were like statues, motionless. Everyone was silent. The idling engines of the planes were the only sound that could be heard. An undetectable killing intent filled the air. Following Harry's command, the Wolf Guard saluted in unison and then turned toward the planes. Then, under the leadership of their respective team leaders, they split into dozens of teams and boarded the planes parked on one side of the airport. After seeing all the planes take off one after another, Harry also wanted to board his own plane and prepared to head to the Hugh family manor. Before boarding the plane, Randy pulled him back. He had reservations about Harry going. He was worried that he would lose his friend. "Harry, I think we can send more people to attack the Hugh family later." "Oh, why?" Harry asked. "Right now, the people of the Crocodile Society are fighting with the Hugh family to the death. They won't be able to escape just because they want to. Why don't we let the Crocodile Society and the Hugh family weaken each other? In any case, the Crocodile Society will just as likely turn their backs on us. Wouldn't it be more beneficial to you if we destroyed them both?" Randy explained. Regarding the matter of the Crocodile Society capturing Harry, Randy had always been brooding over it. Although Harry had already generously forgiven Vicky, and the two parties had also cooperated, they could be considered as a quasi-alliance at the moment. However, Harry's magnanimity didn't mean that Randy's magnanimity was also big. He wished that the people of the Crocodile Society were all killed. As for the agreement between Harry and the Crocodile Society to let them attack the Hugh family, he promised they could take anything they wanted when they succeeded. Randy agreed with this deal, but the most important thing for him was to let these two groups fight each other. The best outcome would be mutual destruction. Harry shook his head. "It's not possible to suppress the Hugh family with just the Crocodile Society alone. The Crocodile Society doesn't have such great strength. If we don't take advantage of the chaos to attack, we will miss this opportunity." The Crocodile Society was strong, but they weren't nearly strong enough to completely destroy the Hugh family. Their only role was to take the lead and disrupt the deployment of the Hugh family, creating favorable conditions for Harry's men to attack. Harry knew that the Crocodile Society would lose a lot of their people if left to fight on their own. Therefore, Harry couldn't sell the Crocodile Society. He had to give them a helping hand. With the Crocodile Society as the vanguard to attack the Hugh family, Harry would send the bionic humans to attack later on. The Wolf Guard would follow the vanguard. The Hugh family would never be able to withstand such an attack. The Crocodile Society had been successful in their sneak attack, but the timing was bad. The Hugh family was on high alert and had all their men deployed waiting for an attack. Naturally, the Crocodile Society had suffered a great loss from their defenses. A large number of people were constantly falling on the way to attack, but under Vicky's constant urging and personal supervision, there was still an endless stream of people attacking. It wasn't only because of Vicky's supervision, but more importantly, her people were blinded by greed. They saw their comrades dying as an advantage to them. The fewer people they had left at the end, the higher the split of the reward they would get. The people of the Crocodile Society who only cared about money had gone crazy. None of them cherished their lives. All of them rushed forward. However, no matter how vigorous their morale was, the bullets flying through the air would kill them just as easily as a coward. A large number of people had fallen in the middle of the attack, causing the Crocodile Society to be unable to continue fighting. Xander, who had been watching the battle, couldn't help but laugh when he saw the current situation. "It's just the Crocodile Society. Do you really think they can take me on?" The butler couldn't help but remind him. "Sir, you have to be careless. We haven't seen Harry or his people yet. I'm afraid he's waiting to strike when we are at our weakest." Xander smiled proudly. "Harry? He's just a little kid. I have never thought much of him. Trying to collude with the Crocodile Society to take down my family is a pathetic move." The butler was indignant. "But sir, the combined strength of the two groups isn't something you should ignore. Plus, the Livingston family and the Banner family." Xander said, "Don't worry. I have already asked around about the Livingston family and the Banner family. The two families have no intention of interfering in this conflict. Therefore, as long as we guard our own base camp, the Crocodile Society will retreat when they can't advance anymore." Xander had another thought in his mind. For someone like the Crocodile Society who only cared about money, the losses this time would be huge. Perhaps before the Hugh family could suffer any more losses, the Crocodile Society would become enemies with Harry. Therefore, he didn't care about the cooperation between these two groups. Vicky saw that more and more of her subordinates had fallen. Their attacks were no longer as fierce as before. The direct line of people around her also started to ask for battle. Vicky lowered her head to look at her watch and then looked up at the sky. She still didn't see any signs of Harry appearing and couldn't help but feel nervous. Although everything was planned well, the biggest uncertainty of this operation was whether Harry would fulfill his side of the agreement. If the Crocodile Society and the Hugh family were allowed to suffer heavy losses, Harry would certainly not suffer any losses. "Why aren't you here yet? I have already opened up a gap in the front," Vicky thought anxiously in her heart. She was even rapidly weighing whether she should give up or use her last bit of strength to send all of her best men over and increase the power of her attacks. If she let go of this opportunity, then this operation would be a complete failure. If that was the case, even if the Crocodile Society were to retain a portion of their strength, they would have to disband when they returned. However, if they pushed all of their most loyal men to the top, all of them would be wiped out before Harry could provide any support. At that time, Vicky would still not gain anything, and she might even become a leader without any support. Vicky's subordinates didn't have so many thoughts. They only knew that they could rob anything they wanted from the Hugh family, and everything they robbed would be theirs. They didn't need to worry about sharing. These people didn't want to miss out on such a great opportunity to make money. Therefore, the people who had yet to enter the arena kept asking Vicky to fight with their respective leaders. Under the urging of these people, Vicky lowered her head again to look at the time. Finally, she gritted her teeth and agreed to the requests of her subordinates. Vicky would take anything to bet that Harry wouldn't break the contract. Under the crazy attack of the Crocodile Society, the outer defense of the Hugh family was barely breaking through. Now that another group of new forces had joined in, the situation immediately changed. The various defense nodes were broken through one after another, and then a chain effect like dominoes. Finally, all the outer defensive lines collapsed. The people from the Crocodile Society charged in and started attacking the second line of defense. This was the core position of the Hugh family, and it was a place that had to be guarded. Therefore, under Xander's arrangement, 3 lines of defense were set up around the manor of the Hugh family. They had the advantage of the terrain on their side. The manor was built in a mountainous area, which gave them ample cover from their enemies, which would have to attack from below. Therefore, the defensive side had the advantage, but the Crocodile Society still managed to flatten the first defense line by relying on wave after wave of people. When the news of the breakthrough reached Xander's ears, he almost thought that he was hallucinating. "What? A bunch of trash like them got through. How could they let those losers from the Crocodile Society fight their way in? If anyone dares to surrender, I'll kill them myself," Xander said in a flustered and exasperated manner. The situation was completely different from what he had expected. He didn't know if these people from the Crocodile Society were crazy or stupid, but they didn't even care if they lived or died and forced their way in. Xander racked his brain, but he still couldn't understand why anyone would be so willing to throw their lives away. Why were they so loyal to Harry if all they could be was cannon fodder? Of course, Xander wouldn't know that Harry had generously promised all the wealth they could get after taking down the Hugh family to the people of the Crocodile Society. Money could make anyone do anything, and it could also make people go crazy with temptation. Xander still thought he had everything under his control. He was very happy in his heart, and he was also full of disdain towards this garbage organization that was attacking him. However, another strong group from the Crocodile Society rushed up and forcefully broke the second defensive line. Such a sudden and vicious attack made Xander panic a little. However, misfortune didn't come alone. At this critical moment, a deafening roar came from the sky. Over 100 large airplanes were flying in a dense formation, covering the entire sky over the manor. A moment later, all the airplanes opened their rear hatch in the air, and parachutes bloomed in the sky. They were as dense as dark clouds, covering the entire sky so tightly that it seemed like it had been almost turned to night. The two sides who were fighting outside the manor were stunned for a moment when they saw the parachutes. They had forgotten that they were fighting to the death at this moment. When Xander saw them, his heart suddenly tightened. His eyes widened, and the teeth in his mouth were chattering. "Harry!" Xander shouted at the top of his voice. The butler who was standing next to him immediately knelt down. "Sir, let's go. I'm afraid we won't be able to guard this place any longer. You must leave." "No, I can't leave. The Hugh family won't fall. Even if Harry has 1,000,000 more men coming, he's got no chance. He won't be able to fight his way in," Xander said stubbornly. He didn't want to admit defeat, and he also didn't want to see the Hugh family being weaker than Harry. He directly rejected the butler's advice. If he ran away now, he could follow the secret passageway and arrive at the secret safe zone that the Hugh family had made a long time ago. However, it was the same as giving up the manor, which was the core area of the family. Xander couldn't bear such a huge loss. Compared to Xander, whose face was full of fear and unwillingness, Vicky was much more relaxed. Harry's subordinates had finally arrived, and the timing was perfect. As the outer perimeter of the Hugh family was breached, and the Crocodile Society continued to attack the second line of defense, Harry's subordinates would be able to provide support in time. The chances of them taking down the Hugh family was very high. Countless parachutes slowly fell from the sky. It was Harry's subordinates who had chosen to land from the sky and attack the Hugh family. However, the people of Wolfguard had chosen to land in the outer perimeter of the Hugh family's defensive circle. After they landed, they would gather in the areas that had already been divided and organize their attacks. All the bionic humans were fearless in front of the onslaught of bullets and landed directly behind one of the defensive lines. Relying on the bionic humans' unassailable defense, the center of the formation bloomed. This was a way of fighting that was out of the norm. Those people from the Hugh family had seen this before, and they didn't know how to deal with it. The bionic humans were best in close combat. No one could escape from such a vicious attack, and no one could block their attack either. At this moment, the bionic humans were like small walking tanks, continuously harvesting the lives of the people from the Hugh family like cutting grass. Miserable wails, fearful whimpers, and screams before death filled the entire manor. The Hugh family retreated and grabbed a couple of RPGs to use against the bionic humans. They saw that their rifles were having no effect. They didn't even care if it would affect the Hugh family members within the attack range. If they did nothing, the bionic humans would kill them anyway. More and more intense explosions rang out in all directions. The bionic humans were submerged in the sea of flames that was ignited by the explosion. When the people of the Hugh family saw this scene, they all stood up and cheered. They were glad that they finally had the means to stop these unstoppable monsters. However, before the cheers could fade completely, they could see figures in the fire. When the flames were extinguished and the smoke was blown away by the wind, everyone was horrified to find out that those monsters weren't harmed at all. They used everything they had against the bionic humans, but nothing seemed to work. However, the bionic humans continued their slaughter. The people of the Hugh family immediately had a mental breakdown. There was nothing they could do in the face of death. Besides, they had never seen bionic humans before. Those who had a quick mind would have thrown away their weapons and fled long ago. Some of the more cowardly fighters did just that and ran as fast as they could. More began to follow them as their friends were killed. The deterrent force of the bionic humans was enormous. This time they had sent a total of 50 of them to fight. Of course, it wasn't that they didn't suffer any losses. Under the concentrated fire of the Hugh family, there were indeed 7 or 8 bionic humans that were affected by the explosion. Some of the weaker parts of the bionic humans were hit by fragments. Their joints were weaker than surrounding areas and were prone to being damaged. However, it was only a small problem. There were only 2 that couldn't move at all. The others still maintained their ability to fight. The might of 50 bionic humans was comparable to an army of thousands of soldiers, causing the Hugh family to be utterly defeated. Such a powerful force shocked everyone. Xander had never thought that Harry had such a powerful force in his hands. It was only a short period of contact, but it was enough to cause the elite troops of the Hugh family to suffer heavy losses. Vicky looked at the subordinates that Harry sent out, and her jaw dropped to the ground in shock. When Harry's plane landed on the flat ground in the distance, Vicky didn't want to be rude. She ran all the way to greet Harry respectfully. "Harry, I didn't expect you to come in person." Harry looked at Vicky's respectful attitude towards him and felt strange in his heart. In the past, she was a cold and beautiful woman. She seemed to be nice to everyone, but today, she seemed especially warm. In fact, Vicky wasn't just enthusiastic and respectful. She was afraid of Harry. Although those bionic humans that were fighting looked no different from a person, the abilities that they displayed weren't what a human could have. Of course, Vicky couldn't understand. She could only think of Harry's mysterious background and the fact that there might be an even greater power behind him. Putting aside those thoughts, just the abilities displayed by the bionic humans in front of her was enough to destroy the Crocodile Society 10 times over. Vicky broke out in cold sweat when she recalled that she had once captured Harry and almost became enemies with him because of Xander. She was glad that she had chosen the right path and didn't make an enemy of Harry. Instead, she took the initiative to express her goodwill and became cooperative. She hurriedly showed respect to Harry and wanted to stabilize the relationship between each other. Of course, Harry didn't know about these little schemes. He wasn't the worm that Vicky imagined he was. But even if he knew, Harry would only smile because he didn't want to fall out with Vicky at all. The existence of the Crocodile Society wouldn't have any impact on Harry, and neither would there be any conflict of interest between the 2 parties. "How's the loss of your subordinates? There seemed to be quite a lot." Harry got off the plane and asked. The flat area that Harry had landed on was set up by the Crocodile Society. It could also be used as a temporary camp to accommodate the wounded that were pulled back from the front. In the place where Harry could see, there were densely packed tents. From the open curtains, he could see that there were wounded people lying inside. What was surprising was that almost all of them were seriously injured. There were very few light injuries that could be seen. "Harry, we have lost a lot of people, but they are still within bearable range. We can still continue fighting," Vicky quickly said. As long as the Crocodile Society was still useful, Harry wouldn't turn against them. Furthermore, she didn't want to tell Harry that these people weren't disciplined by Vicky. She wouldn't regret it even if they died. As for why they were more heavily injured, this was very easy to understand, because they had the promise to rob the Hugh family's wealth to their heart's content. As long as the Crocodile Society's men who participated in the attack weren't injured to the point of losing their ability to move, they would definitely endure the pain and continue to charge. However, once one gave up on robbing because of injury, then one could only watch helplessly as others returned with the wealth that could be theirs. They would be left with the scraps. Therefore, as long as they could move, they would fight for anything they could get their hands on. Harry couldn't help but sigh when he saw the people from the Crocodile Society fighting with all their might. It was only money that could move people's hearts. "We had a deal. Don't worry. As long as we take down the Hugh family, our previous agreement won't change." Harry looked at Vicky's cautious look and understood what she was worried about. With Harry's promise once again, Vicky's hanging heart relaxed a little. She was afraid that Harry would stab her in the back. After all, the wealth stored in the Hugh family must be quite substantial. If Harry didn't want to give it to her, Vicky couldn't do anything to him. Harry had gathered thousands of men from his wolf guard. Just by relying on those bionic humans alone, he would still be able to annihilate the Crocodile Society without leaving anything behind. After being comforted by Harry, Vicky still didn't dare to be neglectful. She respectfully invited Harry to the temporary command center that she had set up and explained the current situation to him. This was unnecessary to Harry, as he had a good handle on the situation when he was flying above the manor. The Hugh family was all but devastated. The fall of the entire manor was just a matter of time. When the manor was completely taken down, it would depend on whether they could capture that old man, Xander. regarding the question of whether Xander would run away or not. In fact, Harry didn't care about it at all. The core of the Hugh family had been destroyed. The amount of strength that Xander had was little to nothing. He wouldn't be able to make a counterattack for a few lifetimes. Even if this old man ran away, as long as Harry offered a high enough reward, there would be people who would be willing to capture him. He raised his binoculars and looked for a moment. He saw that sending his bionic humans into the center of their defenses had been successful. Harry nodded his head in satisfaction. The Hugh family was in chaos. Under the attack of the Crocodile Society, and under the slaughter of the bionic human, the battlefield had become a complete mess. "Wolf guards, surround the entire manor. Don't let anyone escape," Harry ordered in a cold voice. "Yes, sir." When Harry sent the elite warriors of the Wolf Guard to launch the final attack, it was as if Xander's bones had been removed from his body, and he was lying weakly on his chair in the manor of the Hugh family. He murmured, "We lost. Our family lost." "Sir, let's go. It will be too late if we don't leave now," the butler cried as he tried to persuade him. He was so anxious that he stomped on the ground. There were a few secret tunnels under the Hugh family manor, which led to different hidden safe places. Apart from the butler and Xander, no one else in the Hugh family had knowledge of these tunnels. This was the last resort that the Hugh family had prepared a long time ago. It was to prevent today's situation from happening and leave someone in charge of the Hugh family so they could pick up the pieces after the attack. These tunnels were valuable. They could help the core members of the Hugh family escape danger without anyone noticing, and then find a way to transfer them to a safe, secret location. They could leave behind a chance of survival and try to make a comeback in the future. However, these tunnels had been built for decades and had never been used. The people of the Hugh family thought that they would never be able to use them in the future. They didn't expect that today would be a moment of life and death. Under the butler's persuasion, Xander hesitated for a moment, then scolded again. "The Hugh family hasn't fallen yet. How can I leave now? But those monsters outside are all killing people without blinking. Sir, your life is more important." Before he could finish, Xander raised his hand and interrupted the butler. "Don't talk anymore. At this point, for the sake of the continuation of the Hugh family, I will throw away my reputation and surrender to Harry." "Ah, sir, could it be that you want to surrender?" the butler said in surprise. "Yes. Send out the negotiators, raise the white flag, and tell Harry that I want to negotiate. As long as I can save the Hugh family, he can demand anything he wants," Xander said with unwillingness in his heart. A moment later, Harry was stunned by what he saw through the telescope. From the main building of the Hugh family manor, a few people walked out with white flags fluttering in the air. Harry didn't know what Xander was up to, but he still asked everyone to stop attacking. "Harry, the Hugh family is just trying to negotiate with us," Vicky said with a cold smile. Harry also smiled. "Indeed. Do you think we still need to negotiate? We can just destroy the Hugh family in one go," Vicky carefully suggested. She couldn't accept Harry negotiating with the Hugh family and stopping the war. At this point, the Hugh family was on the verge of collapsing. Once Harry agreed to stop the war, the Crocodile Society would suffer a great loss. Their previous deal with Harry would be null and void. Harry looked at Vicky and smiled. "What is it? Are you anxious?" "I'm not. Don't misunderstand. I'll still follow your orders." Vicky said something that didn't match her heart. Harry laughed. "Don't worry. You won't get anything less than what you deserve. I won't spare the Hugh family either. However, it's also a good thing that Xander wants to negotiate with us. We can use this as an excuse to capture him." Harry didn't want to trouble himself in the future if he could capture Xander now. Although it was a little unscrupulous, Harry didn't really care. By using the opportunity of negotiation to trick Xander out of hiding, he could directly capture this old man, saving Harry a lot of trouble. Therefore, when the few people sent by the Hugh family were brought to Harry, Harry straightforwardly told them, "Xander wants to negotiate. Fine, I'll give him the chance to come out and see me personally." The few representatives of the Hugh family looked at each other for a moment and said stubbornly, "My family's leader is very wealthy. We are the representatives of the family. Mr. Parker, you can negotiate with us." Harry sneered and said, "I'll only speak with Xander, not his delinquents." June, who was standing beside Harry, shouted, "Mr. Parker has personally invited him to talk. If Xander dares not to show his face, then he will be crushed. Let's see how long you can last if you continue to fight." The few people from the Hugh family immediately lost their temper. They didn't have any bargaining chips in their hands, and there was no room for negotiation. They could only dejectedly be sent back to report Harry's request to Xander. What? Harry is here? Xander was very shocked when he heard the report from his subordinate. He didn't expect Harry to come here personally. The butler tried to persuade him. Sir, you can't go. Now that we have lost all our forces, there is no way we can guarantee your safety. I think we should retreat. Of course, Xander also knew that leaving along the tunnel was the safest way. However, he wasn't willing to let the Hugh family fall into Harry's hands just like that. Furthermore, as the leader of the Hugh family, he had a high position in his life. If he abandoned the foundation of his family and ran away today, he would lose everything. The taste of power was the hardest to give up. Xander wasn't willing to give it up. Therefore, he wanted to take a gamble. Even if he gave up most of his wealth, as long as he could protect the core of the Hugh family, he would still be the high and mighty Sir of the Hugh family. He also understood that Harry wanted him to negotiate with him personally. There would definitely be all kinds of humiliation. Even if Harry wanted the Hugh family to become his dog, Xander would still bear with it to protect his wealth. A man should know when to yield and when to strike. As long as he could protect his foundation, he would have a chance to make a comeback sooner or later. At most, he would have to wait until his strength had recovered before competing with Harry. After weighing all these ideas in his mind, Xander made a decision. I'll personally go and negotiate with Harry. Butler was anxious. Sir, you need to think carefully. Harry might not want to actually talk. I have made up my mind. As long as I can protect the Hugh family, I will agree to any conditions he wants. What else can Harry do? After saying that, Xander walked out of the manor without looking back. Harry had already asked his subordinates to set up a tent in an open space outside. There were tables and chairs inside waiting for Xander's arrival. When he saw Xander come out of the manor, Harry was a little surprised. He only mentioned it casually and didn't really expect Xander to agree. Xander walked to Harry with staggering steps. After standing still, he examined Harry for a moment. Strictly speaking, this was the first time the two of them had met face to face. Xander had never thought that Harry, who he had used all kinds of means to force Harry to go to heaven and earth and almost lose his life, would now face him as the victor. Such a rapid change made Xander smile bitterly. If he knew this would happen, he wouldn't have done it. In Xander's eyes, Harry was an out-and-out malefic who specialized in attacking large families like the Hugh family. The Hugh family had experienced all kinds of storms over the years, but it just so happened to fall to a young brat like Harry. Xander was sad to see all of his hard work come to such a pitiful end. Xander held back his anger and said, Harry, I admit that the Hugh family has been defeated, but I'd hold off your anger for a moment. Let's reconcile and make a deal to let my family leave with our lives. What do you think? He bowed his noble head deeply to Harry. Xander's subordinates who followed him saw that their master spoke in such a humble manner and had a sad look on their faces. All of them lowered their heads. Harry's subordinates, on the other hand, were the victors of this battle, and they wanted it to be known. They raised their heads high, barely even looking at the men and women bowing their heads to them. After listening to Xander's request, Harry sneered, Xander, to forgive your family, what kind of conditions do you think are more appropriate? Harry didn't bother to answer this question. He asked Xander directly. Xander hesitated. He hadn't thought about how to give up the family's benefits for a while to satisfy Harry. Harry said calmly, Your son attacked my territory. Then you hired the Crocodile Society to kidnap and leave me in a cave for you to torture me. You're going to have to offer quite a bit to save your family from annihilation. Listening to Harry say these words unhurriedly, sweat kept dripping down Xander's forehead. In the end, the Hugh family was blinded by Harry's wealth. They couldn't help but fight him for it. Although Xander felt regret in his heart, if he was given another chance, he would still do the same thing. As for the Hugh family, as a big family, Xander would be jealous when he saw Harry's jade mine that contained more than $10 billion in raw jade. He was also full of disdain for Harry's action of not exploiting the rich or mine. There was a huge amount of wealth that could be earned, but he just sat on it. It was simply a waste of God's gifts. Xander thought. Speak. I have nothing else to say. Are you going to deny that your family started this whole mess? Harry asked in a serious tone. Xander wiped his sweat and gritted his teeth. We were arrogant and blinded by money. I'm willing to offer you a lot of money, Harry, to make up for our mistakes. Harry sneered and said, What does your family have that can make up for my loss? Xander thought for a moment and gritted his teeth. Other than the jade mines, I can give you all my other properties. The Hugh family's wealth wasn't only limited to the dozens of jade mines they owned. Over the years, they had also invested in many revenue streams, with the jade mines supplementing their growth. Hotel, real estate, and some raw materials trading were the main pillars of the Hugh family's industries. Moreover, these industries were very lucrative, and the total market value was more than 10 billion. Xander felt that using such a large amount of wealth to buy the continuity of the family should be enough for Harry. Indeed, when he said these things, Vicky's eyes lit up. She knew how valuable these properties of the Hugh family were. However, when she thought about how the Hugh family would fall with just a thought from Harry, Vicky stifled her heart. Sure enough, after the conditions were stated, Harry smiled. I don't care about your family property at all. To me, these are just some ordinary properties. You are too naive to think that you can use these things to buy the lives of everyone in the Hugh family, Xander said in the atmosphere. This is close to 100 billion worth of assets. If you aren't satisfied with that much money, what else do you want? Harry pulled his face down and looked straight at Xander. I want to destroy your entire family. What? Xander was shocked. He didn't expect that Harry would really want to destroy his entire family, leaving him with no chance of survival. Looking at Harry's resolute expression, Xander knew that there was no need to talk about it anymore. Harry wouldn't let him go no matter what. Take him down! Harry waved his hand decisively. The guards behind him stepped forward and pressed Xander to the ground. Xander's butler yelled, Mr. Parker, what are you doing? We are here to negotiate. Don't tell me you are so despicable that you don't even care about etiquette. Harry sneered. What nonsense are you talking about? What about the etiquette when the Hugh family kidnapped me? Don't act like you're someone with integrity. Xander's butler was instantly speechless. The Hugh family didn't pay attention to the etiquette first, so he couldn't blame Harry for using underhanded tactics now. Xander, who was being controlled, had a defeated look on his face. He knew that from now on, the Hugh family was finished. Drag them away and lock them up. The rest of you continue to attack. Let none of them leave, Harry ordered. Yes, sir. His group of subordinates responded loudly. Vicky was even more excited and shouted loudly. The Crocodile Society had suffered a great loss this time, but compared to the loss of those people, the benefits they would receive were much greater. Although the people of the Crocodile Society could rob and plunder freely after attacking the Hugh family, the amount of wealth they could plunder was still limited. The amount of wealth Harry promised to the Crocodile Society was frightening. All the wealth of the Hugh family would belong to the Crocodile Society. For a moment, the people of the Crocodile Society became even more enthusiastic about fighting. The abilities they displayed were even more terrifying than Harry's wolf guard. They howled and rushed towards the manor of the Hugh family. After losing Xander, the people in the Hugh family manor quickly lost their fighting spirit. From the beginning, they were forced to retreat in defeat, and gradually they started to flee in large numbers. Everyone knew that the Hugh family had lost its momentum. It would be ridiculous if they still wanted to be loyal to a family that did not exist anymore. Facing the joint attack of Harry's elite wolf guard and the Crocodile Society, the Hugh family's already shaky resistance immediately collapsed. Everyone threw down their weapons or knelt down to surrender, begging for their lives. Or they would simply take away some of the treasures in the manor and then take the opportunity to escape. However, these people had ulterior motives and wanted to make a small fortune first before the Hugh family fell. They were stopped by the people of the Crocodile Society in the outer region of the home before they could escape. The Crocodile Society wouldn't tolerate it. They wouldn't want the wealth that was rightfully theirs to be taken by some fleeing cowards. Therefore, when the battle was about to come to an end, they had their eyes fixed on the exit of the Hugh family manor. They wouldn't allow a single person to escape at this time. The battle that was besieging the Hugh family manor continued for the whole day. By the time the battle came to an end, it was already dusk. Harry's subordinates took all the surrendered prisoners and sent a group of people into the manor to collect the relevant documents regarding the properties and personnel of the Hugh family. This manor was the core of the Hugh family. All the information would be gathered here. When Harry possessed these documents, the entire Hugh family would be under his control. The people of the Crocodile Society had no interest in these things. All of their attention was focused on looting the rest of the manor. These were the spoils of war that they deserved. Harry wouldn't stop them from taking whatever they wanted. They weren't allowed to destroy the property. If it wasn't bolted to the floor, it was free for them to take. There were even people who wanted to use a small shovel to pry the murals off the wall and bring them back, not to mention those expensive calligraphy paintings, antiques, and porcelain. Even the tableware that Xander usually used for meals wasn't spared. There wasn't even a spoon left. After all, the tableware was made of either gold or silver. The workmanship was obviously the work of a master smith. What was even more excessive was that even the staircase guardrail and the others wanted to tear it down and take it away. This was because there were sharp-eyed people who discovered that these wooden guardrails were made of golden silkwood. This was some of the rarest wood in the world. It was worth several $1,000s per foot. Later on, Vicky still felt that what they were doing would be too destructive, so she put a stop to it. After all, the Crocodile Society had taken away the amassed fortune. The manor was Harry's spoils of war. If they emptied it completely, it would be a breach of their contract. Harry didn't care about the situation where the people of the Crocodile Society were fighting for food like hungry dogs. Even if he didn't get all of the Hugh family fortune, he didn't care. Compared to the properties he had already set up, it was the difference between an ant and an elephant. He could buy the Hugh family 10 times over. In the core territory of the Hugh family, everything had already been settled. In their other territories, this wasn't the case. There were still sporadic battles going on. The Hugh family was a huge family, and it wasn't just the manor that needed to be captured. They also needed to send people to attack and defend the other properties, as well as the small families attached to the Hugh family. Harry wouldn't forgive them for helping his enemy. However, these belonged to a different battlefield. Harry didn't need to send out his most elite subordinates. Instead, he handed them over to the people of the Crocodile Society, as well as Harvey and Randy's subordinates to deal with them. Although they were all small forces that could be handled easily, there were many of them, and it would be very cumbersome to deal with them all at the same time. It took them a few days to settle everything. By the time Randy and Harvey arrived at Harry's side, the Hugh family would be completely under Harry's control. Time passed and Harry was back in his own manor on Allen Island. "How was it here on the island? Did you guys have to fight pretty hard?" Harry asked while drinking with Harvey and Randy. "I didn't lose a lot. It was just a bunch of new hires." Harvey shook his head. Without the support of Xander, the major power of the Hugh family, the other smaller powers wouldn't be able to put up much resistance. Under the joint attack of Harvey and Randy, they fell down one by one like an avalanche, and this was only because the two of them had only used their own power. They didn't even use their family members. "Mr. Parker, are you really going to let those people from the Crocodile Society rob the wealth of the Hugh family? They are still plundering. It's going to be endless," Randy said with dissatisfaction. Harry waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter, it's just a little bit of money." Randy choked. He wanted to complain, but he couldn't. As long as it was something that could be taken away, there was absolutely no possibility of it being left behind. Even though the toilet was made of pure gold, these people didn't mind and still pried it off the ground and took it. These people from the Crocodile Society had been plundering non-stop for the past few days and nights. Their container trucks were filled up one after another. They were lined up on the road to the port. Harry found it funny when he saw Randy's aggrieved look. He comforted him. "That's nothing. They've got more money and fixed assets. The Hugh family is already under our control. You have also contributed to their downfall, and you should get as much as you deserve." After that, it was time to split the spoils. Harry called Mr. Cross over and gave him some instructions. A moment later, Mr. Cross came in with a few financial personnel holding a laptop. Harry said, "The accounts of all the industries in the Hugh family have been seized. Take whatever you want." Harvey and Randy looked at each other in surprise. They didn't expect this to happen. They shook their heads together. "We didn't do all that much. There is no need to take anything. Let's just forget about it." Harry said unhappily, "What are you talking about? I'm not the kind of friend to use your help and give you nothing in return, do I? You can choose whatever you want. Besides, I don't take care of my own business, and I can't take care of the Hugh family either. You are helping me carry the burden." Harvey waved his hand and said, "Forget it, I didn't do it for the money." Harry said unhappily, "Fine, if you don't choose, I'll choose for you." After saying that, he swiped on the account book and gave it all to the two of them without even looking at it. Harvey and Randy were dumbfounded. According to Harry's method, all the properties of the Hugh family were given to the two of them. Harry didn't hold back at all. They quickly waved their hands and said, Harry, you can't! Harry said, "What's wrong? I don't care about these properties. It will be a burden to me anyway. I might as well let the two of you manage those assets since you seem to care so much." All the fixed assets in the Hugh family were worth hundreds of billions. Harry really didn't want any of it. It would take a lot of effort and resources to maintain these properties, but they could also earn a lot of money by selling them where needed. Therefore, it wasn't necessarily a bad thing to be entrusted with this vast property. It would depend on how the two of them would deal with it after taking over such a vast amount of wealth. Anyway, Harry didn't have the mood or the patience to manage these and wasn't prepared to take the money. His current assets were on track to start making massive profits. He could start operating and making money soon, so he didn't care about the Hugh family's businesses at all. Harvey and Randy rejected him again, and the three of them finally discussed the distribution method. Apart from the jade mines, the rest of the mines the Hugh family owned were all given to Harry, and the rest were split equally between Harvey and Randy. Harry finally accepted these mines after the two of them tried their best to persuade him to keep them. Harry thought about it for a while. He remembered that after the opening of his super factory, he would also need some raw materials. It would be much more convenient for him to open up a few more smelting factories in his own mines. At least the raw materials wouldn't all need to be purchased from outside sources. Fallon, who was in the camp of Reflecting Moon Island, was still looking forward to his family coming to save him. He had been looking forward to his rescue, but in the end, the news that did come was hard to accept. Harry released all the lower-level guards while keeping most of the executives. The rest of the core members were all captured and brought into the camp with Fallon. Fallon looked at the group of familiar faces that were sent in. Shocked, he ran over and asked loudly, "Why are you all here? Where are the reinforcements?" "Sir," the person who was asked had a bitter expression on his face. When he found out the truth, Fallon powerlessly sat on the ground. With a defeated expression, he muttered, "What? The Hugh family? Fell?" The number of core members in the Hugh family wasn't a small number. Harry couldn't take them all prisoner. Harry wanted to give the rest to Harvey and Randy, but they had no room for them either. Letting these people go now would only be a problem later, so they had to be locked up. Fortunately, Vicky had offered her assistance. Vicky and her organization knew a lot of interested people that needed workers. They had a few deals where they would send captives to labor camps. It was an effective way to get rid of prisoners that could lay claim to some conquered fortune. Harry wasn't a saint. Since Fallon was his enemy, he wasn't opposed to sending him to a mine where he would most likely die. As for Xander, he was locked up in a secret chamber by the Wolf Guard. The old man still had a lot of value in him. Harry still needed to tell him all about the secret treasures that the Hugh family had been hiding all these years. Although Harry didn't care about these treasures, he didn't want someone else to find them. If someone knew about these stockpiles and escaped custody, they could use that money to hurt Harry in the future. If there were people who wanted to take revenge on Harry, they would just go to these secret hiding places and pay mercenaries to sabotage Harry. Harry had to obtain this wealth to protect himself. Harry didn't care how the Wolf Guard got the information out of Xander. As long as they produced results, he would be happy. Harry was currently surrounded by a large group of doctors, and they were performing a thorough body examination. Walking out of a primitive place like Savage Mountain, no one knew if Harry would be infected by some unknown bacteria or virus. There was also a chance he contracted a disease that would take a long time to cause any real damage. Therefore, under the strong persuasion of his subordinates, Harry begrudgingly accepted this thorough examination. June called over a dozen medical experts with various specialties from Maryland Sanctuary Hospital to examine Harry in detail. June became even more anxious after learning that the superconductive ore Harry brought gave off a slight amount of radiation. Harry had come into direct contact with the ore. Radiation was hard to detect with the naked eye, but it could cause fatal damage to the human body. June didn't want to risk it and ordered the doctor to do the most detailed genetic test for Harry. The most direct damage caused by radiation to the human body was damaging the DNA in the human body, indirectly causing various kinds of problems. Testing for genetic variations was necessary to identify if Harry was harmed by the radiation. After being examined by hundreds of instruments by various doctors, Harry was exhausted. After the examination, Harry felt like a weight was lifted off his chest, and he heaved a sigh of relief. While waiting for the examination results, Harry went to the Research Institute again. Callie had done a physical examination at the same time and returned to the Research Institute to analyze the superconductive ore. Harry really wanted to know the results from her testing, so he came over to the lab to watch her progress. But because these things were radioactive, June strongly requested Harry not to look at them at a close distance. He could only sit in front of the monitor and watch Callie and the other researchers work from afar. When the other researchers found out that Harry and Callie brought such a magical ore from Savage Mountain, they were very excited. The practical use of the fusion reactor was something Callie had always wanted to conquer, and it was the same for Stephen and the others. After all, this was groundbreaking material. If they could synthesize it and use it in a fusion reactor, they could produce an endless supply of energy. There was no need to worry about maintaining the operation of society after the existing fossil fuels were depleted. Energy was something that society couldn't do without. The entire world needed energy, and it would pay a lot of money for it. As the world developed new technologies, the demand for energy grew as well. With this technology, he could be the wealthiest man in the world. However, there were also many hidden dangers. Such a huge amount of wealth was very tempting. There would be people that would envy his wealth and would try to steal it from him. Therefore, once this technology was perfected, it would become practical to build and operate on a large scale. When it became marketable, it would be the time when Harry would become the target of many enemies that wanted to steal his technology. It was more necessary now to have a huge force guarding Harry's property. Fortunately, Harry had already thought of this, and had already made plans to make his properties easily defendable. The real purpose of the super factory was to build an indestructible bionic army for Harry. With such a super powerful force as a deterrent, no one would dare go after Harry or his property. After a few appearances, Harry's bionic humans were no longer a secret. Many of the forces in the outside world had a direct or indirect understanding of what they were. After all, the strength that the bionic humans displayed during their battles wasn't something that ordinary people could possess. It was during the time when Harry used Lara to rescue Kiki that knowledge of them had leaked. They knew that Sanderson and all his men weren't enough to even stop one of the bionic humans. Therefore, it wasn't strange for bionic humans to be discovered by the outside world. It was just that the people outside only had very limited knowledge about them. They only knew that Harry had an impossibly strong weapon. No one would know for the time being, let alone know that Lara and the others weren't humans. Instead, it was a machine made of metal that was draped in a facsimile of a human. In the Research Institute, under Callie's lead, a group of researchers surrounded all kinds of analytic instruments. They determined that the material was like nothing they had ever seen before and had many desirable properties for their project. Not only could it maintain its superconductive properties under normal temperature and pressure, but according to analysis and simulations, even in extreme environments, it could still maintain this property without much variation. After Stephen witnessed the power of this kind of ore, he could no longer keep his mouth shut. He said to Harry, who was watching from the other side of the monitor, "Boss, what are we waiting for? This stuff is in Savage Mountain. There is still a lot of ore, right? We need to hurry up and start mining." "Yeah, boss. This is some kind of super element. I can't wait to start building the fusion reactor. Let's go now," said an engineer. "We have to dig it all up. We can't leave anything behind," said another. Harry looked at his subordinates' eager expressions and smiled. "What's the rush? The ore is right there. It isn't going anywhere." "What if someone else finds out about it?" Stephen said worriedly. Harry asked, "Callie, didn't you say you can synthesize it in a lab?" Callie sat on the analytic instrument and operated it for a moment before saying, "It isn't difficult. The ore is silicon-based with some impurities. When we synthesize it, we can get a higher purity than anything in the Savage Mountain." Stephen said, "We still have to make it from something. We might as well use the ore from the mountain. The natural raw ore is the most suitable for refining." The others also agreed. Harry smiled. "In that case, let's go mining. But for the time being, we don't need to rush." "Why?" Stephen was puzzled. "Callie has seen the situation at the mountain with her own eyes. It is more complicated than just digging up a couple rocks. Ask Callie about it later," Harry explained. The biggest obstacle was the complicated environment of the mountain. It was too difficult to transport a large number of people and mining equipment into the rough terrain and magnetic interference. Even if these problems were solved, there would still be a lot of follow-up problems. In the underground space where the superconductive ores were located, the tunnels were like a maze. The monsters also posed a huge threat and would be a nightmare to get rid of. Up until now, Harry still had no idea what that huge worm monster was. It was probably the biggest obstacle they would have to overcome. With so many problems, Harry immediately dispelled the idea and thought it would be a waste of time and money. It was faster and more convenient to invest in synthetic ores. Harry was too lazy to explain these things to Stephen and the others, so he would just let Callie have a headache over explaining it. However, Callie was in the best of moods. After this genius obtained the key to solving the fusion reactor problem, it was as if she had opened a treasure vault. She said to everyone, "Follow me, I have something to show you." She brought everyone to her own workshop. Harry also followed, wanting to see what kind of treasure Callie was going to take out. She turned on her computer, entered the secret key, and entered an encrypted folder. Callie showed everyone a design blueprint that she didn't let anyone know about before. When Harry first looked at some data and blueprints, he was still confused. Stephen was the first to recognize and react. He cried out involuntarily, "No way did you figure out how to make a powered exoskeleton!" Callie nodded her head. "That's right. I had just been playing around with the idea and came up with this kind of design. It might still be a bit crude, but I'm having trouble finding a compatible power source." Harry asked, "The super batteries won't work?" Callie shook her head. "This armor system uses a pulse jetpack. That kind of energy output would be too much for the batteries alone. Only a miniaturized fusion reactor can supply that kind of power." "Awesome," Harry praised from the bottom of his heart. As the data and structure on the computer screen turned into 3D dynamic simulations, Harry finally saw the full view of the kinetic armor. The overall appearance and structure was a bit bulky, but not so much that it was a towering suit of metal. Instead, it was a combination of the two. The angular shape and streamlined shape were perfectly combined on the same body. Only then did Harry realize that Callie was a genius with industrial art design. "Callie, what is the purpose of you showing us this?" Harry asked. Callie was indifferent. She said lightly, "The biggest obstacle to going to Savage Mountain to collect superconductive ores is the inconvenience of transportation and that mysterious monster. But with this kind of armor, I think that it could eliminate these problems entirely." Harry looked at the blueprint in front of him and felt delighted in his heart. Harry's interest was piqued. He carefully looked at the detailed parameters in the blueprint. According to Callie's design, the power armor was a completely sealed environment, which meant that the entire body was covered with armor. The joints were less armored but were still covered. The other parts were made of the same special alloy as the bones in the bionic humans. The alloy was very strong. It was resistant to all forms of weapons, even explosives. With such hard metal armor covering his entire body, Harry believed that even if he encountered the mysterious monster that could dig through solid stone, he would be completely safe. A problem that Callie had solved was a way to counteract the interference that the monster and the mountain produced. Callie increased the power of the anti-interference device. Even in a complicated electromagnetic environment, it was still able to maintain a strong connection with other devices and outside the mountain. The suit could be used for days on end without stopping if the miniature fusion reactor was installed. However, considering the large energy demand on the power armor, the fusion reactor would still have to be pretty big to accommodate the size of the fuel. After browsing through these parameters, Harry immediately decided, "Start building the power armor right away. How long will it take to make a prototype?" Callie calculated in her heart and said, "If the others help me, it should be about 2 to 3 months." "Okay, then concentrate on the prototype." Harry smiled and said, 2 or 3 months wasn't a long time. Compared to other weapon designs or industrial product designs, most prototypes took a year or two to be developed enough for testing. After creating the experimental model, there were still many tests and experiments that needed to be conducted. It would take at least 3 to 5 years for it to become practical. Harry gathered all the manpower and resources in the research institute and started having them work on the power armor. After 2 to 3 months, the armor would be tested more extensively. However, there was one advantage of being a genius like Callie. The things she designed were basically perfect and didn't require too many modifications. After all, the various tests of the prototype were to find any flaws that they could fix when it was manufactured. Callie's design had already taken into account all kinds of practical situations in her super genius brain, so the designs that she made had little to no flaws. In Harry's heart, there was always one thing that he was worried about, and that was the huge difference between the combat strength of the bionic humans and the Wolf Guard. Currently, the number of people in the Wolf Guard was greater, but the bionic humans were far better in every way. Harry had plans to make more and more bionic humans to help defend all of his assets and people. Although the combat strength of the bionic humans was stronger than any person, there were still some areas that they were lacking. Compared to the Wolf Guard, the decision-making of the bionic humans was still lacking. After all, it was just an intelligent machine. No matter how smart an artificial intelligence was, it couldn't compare to a real human brain. However, the Wolf Guard only had so many people. It wasn't possible to expand the number of members in their ranks in a short period of time. Finding and training candidates to their level of combat readiness was difficult under any circumstance. The job was demanding and loyalty was key. As a group of well-trained elites, they needed a lot of time to recruit and train their newer members. This was also a place where humans were restricted. Unlike the standard production of bionic human, as long as the assembly line was opened, there would be a large number of combat units of the same strength. In order to balance the two sides, Harry also considered for a long time. Now the problem has been solved. With the high-tech power armor, everyone in the Wolf Guard could use one, and it wouldn't be as important to train as grueling as they used to. Their combat strength would immediately be on par with the bionic humans. When they carried out missions in the future, the Wolf Guard would be the lead that would make the snap decisions needed in any conflict, and they would bring along a few bionic humans as support. It was a perfect battle arrangement. Moreover, once the power armor was designed and completed, the bionic humans production line could be started, and they could start producing the suits on a larger scale. Go ahead and order more of the raw materials and the spare parts. The more the better. When the suit can be mass-produced, I want everyone from the Wolf Guard to be equipped with power armor, Harry said to everyone. We have already purchased a large number of resources. If we buy more now, the cost is going to skyrocket. If we need to purchase from them again in the near future, the cost will increase exponentially. Stephen was quite economical. Stephen had doubts about Harry's proposal. Harry acknowledged this issue, but he didn't care about the cost. In order to increase his strength as soon as possible and use an overwhelming advantage to intimidate all potential opponents, Harry wouldn't hesitate to spend even more money. It's fine. It's just a little more money, isn't it? I can afford it. Just buy as much as you can get a hold of. Prepare to manufacture 10,000 suits of power armor, Harry said very straightforwardly. There were more than 6,000 people in the Wolf Guard, and each of them had to be equipped with a suit. In addition, Harry also had to consider having a few spares in case some were damaged. 10,000 units wasn't a lot. Callie had also estimated the manufacturing cost for each suit. They could make 3 power armors at the same cost as 1 bionic human. Because the structure of the bionic humans was more precise, the cost was higher. However, this excluded the cost of the fusion reactor. As for the cost of the miniaturized fusion reactor, it was still unknown. Everything would have to wait until the first experimental model was completed, and after a lot of tests would they really know the true cost of the power armor. Harry returned to his manor after he discussed their plans going forward. As soon as he entered, he saw June coming over with a solemn expression. Sir, your physical examination results are out. You are fine, but we made an unexpected discovery. When Harry first saw June's solemn expression, his heart skipped a beat. He was quite frightened. He thought that he really had some serious illness caused by the radiation, but when he heard June say that he was fine, he let out a sigh of relief. But then June said that there was an unexpected discovery, which made Harry's heart tighten again. What, is there still a problem? Harry asked nervously. June shook her head. Yes and no. Sir, you may have a younger sister. What? Harry widened his eyes in shock. This was impossible. Harry's parents were long gone. He couldn't possibly have a sister. June said, When I was completing the gene analysis for you and the genes left by your father, I found 2 matches. But in the process of the computer's analysis, another set of genetic data appeared in the database. June needed to compare the test results with older tests on record. She wanted to see if anything had changed and if Harry was at risk for cancer. The previous test results needed to be searched in the hospital database, but in this search, other than Harry's previous test results, there were also the results of Harry's parents. June also found another test she had never seen before. After comparison, this unexpected gene test showed that the person was related to Harry through his father but not his mother. Are you sure about this? Could there be a bug in the database? Harry asked in disbelief. He didn't think that he had lived for more than 20 years without knowing he had a younger sister. In the past, he didn't know at all. Harry's parents also didn't mention this to him, nor did anyone mention it to him. Therefore, it was normal for Harry to have doubts. But June said with certainty. The doctor was also suspicious at first, but after a careful investigation, he found that it was a real test. That's not possible. Is there a possibility of fraud? Harry was still skeptical. It was very common for people to fake being related to some rich families. People would do anything in order to enter the wealthy class to get an endless amount of money that they could never spend in their lifetime. They would use all kinds of tricks to get an inheritance. Producing fake data was child's play. Many hackers would use the weak cybersecurity of a hospital to change their records to match with someone who was rich. A lot of wealthy young men would sleep with many different women who could possibly become pregnant. Their promiscuity was used against them to pretend that they were their child from a one-night stand. Genetic testing was the go-to method for proving blood relation. The hacker's goal was to find an aging man who had inherited his family's wealth and had no kids. The hacker would then try to prove they are part of the family and therefore rightfully come when the aging man passes. With good enough skills, the forgery on the hospital database would be indistinguishable from the real thing. Now that technology has developed, recognizing relatives has become much easier. However, regardless of how scientific and accurate the genetic test was, as long as it was done by humans, there would definitely be loopholes that could be exploited. Doctors and examiners could be bribed, making the false report look even more real. Harry was also a young heir of a wealthy family, and he was also from a top family. Although he had yet to inherit his family's entire fortune, Harry's parents had unexpectedly passed away, and he was still the only son. Therefore, Harry had reason to believe that this test result that appeared out of nowhere was most likely fabricated by someone. If he wanted to see if the report was falsified, all he would have to do was track down the person who took the test. Only then could he figure out if they were a legitimate relative. If he really did have a half-sister, it would prove to be a problem for Harry. He was in line to inherit everything if he could defeat his other siblings. His half-sister could become a major problem that would stop him from inheriting his family's fortune. There was only one heir that could lead and control the family assets. Everyone wanted to become the most powerful person in the world, and it was unavoidable for there to be a fight over control. Harry thought that some of his relatives might see him as a threat and wanted to use a proxy to discredit his father and thereby discredit him. Although illegitimate children had a low status in wealthy families, sometimes they were accepted if no other heirs existed. His half-sister might be used against him. The Parker family was different from most rich families. If an heir was illegitimate, but still related by blood to the family, they would be accepted with open arms. June naturally had a lot of doubts, but the problem was that she could not know whether it was real or fake. She had to keep her guard up. If it was fake, it meant that there was someone who had plotted against Harry. She had to find out who was behind this as soon as possible. But if it was true and this person was really Harry's sister, Harry was the closest person in the world to her, so he couldn't just let her live without her knowing the vast wealth that she could have. "Sir, I think it's better to let the doctor investigate it personally," June suggested. This matter was too important. Not everyone could intervene. Only people like June, Harry's most trusted person, could investigate. The others didn't doubt their loyalty, but to prevent any mishaps. When it involved Harry's family, it wasn't excessive to be careful and pay attention to this matter. Harry thought for a moment and said, "Let me have a look at the detailed information first." June immediately handed the file bag that she had prepared in advance to Harry. A thick stack of information in it listed the sudden situation of this younger sister in detail. Harry took out the information and looked at it very seriously. June prepared it very carefully. There was also a photo at the top of the information. Michaela Sunder, using her mother's surname. When doing the gene test, she was 14 years old. The test was 3 years ago, and now she will be 17 years old. Harry took a closer look at the photo. It was Michaela's, and she looked to be about 14 years old. There was a hint of depression hidden on her face. It must be that her life wasn't smooth, or that she had encountered some unhappy things when she was taking pictures. Harry found it hard to guess. However, when comparing their facial features, there were many similarities between their facial features. If they were really siblings, just their facial features would make people believe them. Harry smiled and threw this idea aside. If it was a fake person, the gene test would be able to fake it. It wasn't difficult to find someone who looked similar. After all, there were billions of people in the world. Even if they weren't related by blood, there were many real cases of strangers who looked like twins. Now Harry needed to consider that this report is fake. Until he firmly believed that this report was true, he would only be falling into someone else's trap. There were also many examples of this happening. In the past, there was a family, and the younger generation all unexpectedly passed away. Only an old man was left to support the family alone, until he discovered he had an illegitimate grandson. It wasn't until the grandson turned up at the old man's front door that he learned of his existence. What made him even more delighted was that this grandson, whom he had never met before, was very obedient and respectful. After successfully recognizing him as family, the old man was naturally very satisfied. The grief and loneliness from the passing of his children and grandchildren had also disappeared. With a new obedient grandson, the old man was naturally surrounded by family happiness. Even though his loyal subordinates had doubts about the identity of this grandson who had suddenly appeared, the old man was 100% sure that it was true. This way, it wouldn't be easy to persuade anyone. It would even cause the old man to fly into a rage and expel many of his loyal subordinates who had advised him to do another inspection. It didn't take long before the old man died. However, what he thought was a good grandson turned out to be fake. After the old man passed away, the supposed grandson immediately took over the entire family. There wasn't even the slightest bit of hindrance, because anyone that liked the old man had left when he told them his grandson would inherit everything. Harry naturally maintained a skeptical attitude. He needed to know if he really had a younger sister. Harry looked at the information in his hands again, and found that this girl called Michaela grew up in a small town with a small family. Now she lived with her biological mother and stepfather, and she also had a younger brother. Harry wasn't interested in the younger brother. That was the child of Michaela's biological mother and stepfather. This family lived in the mountain city. Their living conditions were average. Michaela's mother was a shopping guide at the mall. Her stepfather didn't have a proper job. The family needed to pay off their mortgage, and they also needed to provide for Michaela and her brother to go to school. Their family was tight on funds. Harry saw Michaela's thin face in the photo and knew that she usually didn't eat well. If she was really Harry's younger sister, then he would feel a twinge of pain seeing a relative suffer like this. Harry had to go and find out if he really had a sister or not. He wouldn't be able to find out if he kept reading over the same documents. Putting down the information in his hands, Harry said to June, "I want to go there personally." If Harry didn't go and confirm it with his own eyes, he wouldn't be able to rest. He trusted June, but he had a suspicion that he might actually have a real sister. Love could blind anyone. Harry had to be cautious that he didn't overlook any possible signs of fraud because he wanted to have a sister. June was naturally unwilling to let him go when she heard that Harry wanted to personally confirm the report. The last time Harry went out, he was kidnapped. She was afraid it would happen again. Hence, June advised, "Sir, I should go. It'll be dangerous for you to go out. I'll bring Michaela back and let you personally confirm it here." Harry shook his head and said, "We're just going to go down and observe them. We'll determine if she is my sister or not when we get there. If it will make you happy, I'll take a few guards with me." "All right then, I'll accompany you." June saw Harry's insistence and could only compromise. Harry nodded and instructed June to gather a team. He didn't want to stay any longer. A small group of bionic humans, along with June and a bionic dog. Harry took his private plane and flew towards the city. There were also a few hundred people from the Wolf Guard following Harry on business planes. The people from the Wolf Guard were all dressed in casual clothes, pretending to be ordinary people and protecting Harry in secret. June didn't dare to let Harry go out without a significant security detail. Harry knew she was just being overprotective. He didn't want to argue and let her bring as many people as she felt was right. Although his original intention was to go alone, Harry didn't want to seem like he didn't respect his subordinates when they worried for his safety. The Wolf Guard that had let Harry be kidnapped were interrogated and accused of being disloyal. Although they knew that these people didn't betray Harry after the incident, they were still given the worst jobs the Wolf Guard had to offer. They wouldn't be let near Harry again. Although Harry didn't blame those people, those were the rules. Everyone had to abide by it, and Harry couldn't break the rules. He had to be strict, even if he felt it wasn't the nicest thing to do. Michaela lived in a place called Mountain City. As the name implied, there were many mountains around the entire city. There was a large river in the middle, and many tributaries converged near the center of the city. It caused the entire city to look a little fragmented, but it was precisely this special terrain that the city grew its own unique culture. The buildings in the city were wildly different sizes, as if they were drawn by a child. At night, the neon lights were dazzling. As a result, it attracted a large number of tourists to come and visit the local clubs and restaurants. The city was also rapidly becoming a business hub where companies would come from all over the world to do business. Therefore, Harry's arrival didn't attract much attention. However, in general, there were always more people who entered the city than they left. Most of them were wealthy people. Mountain City was a city with potential for development. A lot of people thought they could make it big in this city. Harry had arrived and planned to disguise himself as a construction worker. Michaela's home was in an old area to the southwest of the city. The city council planned on expanding and focused most of its budget on building and improving the newer sections of the city. The old city seemed to be more run down. As for the residential area where Michaela's home was located, the buildings were built 30 years ago and were in disrepair. The roofs were rotting and the walls had their paint chipping away with the wood rotting underneath. A lot of houses were condemned and deemed unfit for habitation. This didn't stop a lot of squatters from living in these houses anyway. The road inside the community was also full of bumps and holes. Garbage could be seen everywhere, and no one was cleaning it up. However, the vegetation here grew luxuriously. Even in the hot summer season, the interior of the community was very cool and refreshing. Harry couldn't complete his disguise before he got on the plane. He had to buy multiple pairs of clothes for his stay in the city. When he went to one of the stores, he arrived in an expensive car. The owner of the store watched him get out of the car he could never hope to afford and walked straight to the bargain bin. He watched as Harry carefully picked out a few sets of clothes and tried to match them as best he could. The owner chalked up Harry's behavior to a rich kid playing pretend. He thought he was bored of wearing his designer clothes and wanted to pretend to be a blue-collar worker. Little did they know, Harry wasn't always rich and knew how he would have dressed if he were on a strict budget. His old life when he was doing his family trials was the toughest point in his life. Harry had barely enough money to eat and buy clothes. He was lucky to have a roof over his head. The shop owner could not know this about Harry, so he made his own assumptions about Harry's character. He was a little insulted that Harry came here to play his little game of pretend. When the rich became so wealthy, they would never have a need for more money. Even the most luxurious shopping centers in the world would have little of value items that they would want to buy. Harry knew this feeling all too well. He could buy anything he ever wanted, which is why he enjoyed smaller shops. People were creative and would strive to make something new or unique. Harry liked these shops most of all. He bought a few clothes that fit well enough and changed back into the handmade suit he was wearing originally. Before they could reach Michaela's neighborhood, Harry ordered the driver to park in the underground parking lot. Harry, who had changed into a normal outfit, got out of the car and walked towards the old neighborhood. Of course, June and the guards didn't dare to let Harry go alone. All of them pretended to be ordinary people and followed Harry around. They walked through the crowd together. Harry was half expecting to see Michaela around every corner, but he knew this was very unlikely. She was currently in her 3rd year of high school. She had to stay in school from morning to night. She would return home at around 10 o'clock in the evening. However, Harry saw Michaela's younger brother, Howie. This kid didn't need to go to school on the weekend of his 2nd year of middle school, so he was playing basketball with his peers on the basketball court in his neighborhood. However, a group of older women wanted to use the court for their own yoga dance session. Howie and his friends refused, and the two groups got into a shouting match. Although Howie was a small person, his temper wasn't small at all. He wasn't afraid at all when facing a group of old women. He was screaming and cursing at them. The women didn't want to give up their dance time to these kids. They were being stubborn and wanted the kids to leave. Both groups got angrier and angrier. Harry had no reason to get himself involved. He was watching from the side of the court with great interest. He just wanted to watch the show. He would only get into trouble if he decided to weigh in on the argument. When the confrontation between the two sides reached its peak, Howie and his friends had listened enough. The women were not as frail as they appeared, and some of them were ready to hit Howie. Howie and his friends' faces turned a deep red with anger. Howie couldn't help it. With a swing of his arm, he threw a basketball toward the face of one of the women who was cursing the loudest. "How dare you hit me in the face? I'm going to beat you!" The woman, who was cursing fiercely and even had her hair hanging down, threw the basketball back toward Howie. The ball struck his neck. Howie had the wind knocked out of him and he could barely breathe. Immediately, he turned pale with fright and started gasping for air. "Fine, old hag, you win this time, but I will make you beg for mercy next time." Howie was a sore loser. Putting down his vicious words, he cursed and left the basketball court. Harry, who was watching from the side, couldn't help but laugh when he saw this scene. He was coincidentally bumped into by Howie, and he was instantly enraged. He pointed at Harry and cursed. "Are you laughing at me? Do you think that I won't kill you?" Harry didn't want to have a conflict with him, and he didn't want to lower himself to the level of this little brat. Thus, he stopped laughing and took a few steps back to show he didn't want any trouble. Howie had been humiliated by the old woman, and seeing Harry cower a little made him feel better. He didn't care about Harry and wanted to leave, so he called over his friends. What Howie didn't see was Harry waving a hand behind his back. He was waving off his guards to not get involved. He didn't want anyone to know his true identity. Had he not backed up when he did, Howie and his friends would have been begging Harry for mercy. After Howie had walked far away, June came to Harry's side and said, "Sir, that was Howie. Did he tell you anything useful?" Harry smiled and shook his head. "I just met him. I don't think we'll be able to get any useful information out of him." "Yeah, he's quite annoying," June couldn't help but say. Harry couldn't help but smile. Howie and June had an inseparable relationship. June hated him the moment she saw him. It was all because Howie's attitude towards Harry wasn't good. Meeting Howie was purely a coincidence. Harry had come to investigate whether Michaela was his real half-sister or not. As for Michaela's other family members, Harry didn't concern himself with them. He wanted to find out whether she was his biological sister or a fake that someone had deliberately set up. Harry walked around the old neighborhood and pretended to be a normal resident. His subordinates were scattered around the key areas of the neighborhood. They were playing their part in protecting Harry. Their secondary goal was to see if anyone was watching Harry to see if he took their bait. When the sky was completely dark, the subordinates who had gone through preliminary investigations came to report. "Sir, from what we can see now, this is indeed a normal civilian district. The people who live here are some old residents, but there are also many foreign employees who rent houses here when they visit for business," June reported to Harry. Harry sat on the roadside under a big tree in the residential area and casually looked around. After listening to the report, he said, "I'm so conflicted right now. I could be meeting my sister for the first time. Why am I so nervous?" June couldn't understand Harry's feelings. She could only speak for his safety. "I think you will have a difficult decision to make when the time comes." Harry smiled and didn't say anything else. It was hard to tell what he was feeling right now. Of course, he hoped that his sister was real, but he was also worried that they might find out that it was fake. At that time, it would be even more difficult to describe his feelings. Being cheated on feelings or familial love was the most unbearable feeling. June looked at Harry's somewhat desolate expression and said with concern, "Sir, it's already so late and you still haven't eaten anything. Why don't you go find something to eat?" "I'm not too hungry. Let's wait for Michaela to finish school," Harry said. June didn't try to persuade him anymore. She stood up and walked a small distance away. Harry was sitting not far from Michaela's house, quietly waiting for her to come back after school. However, he would have to wait until 10 o'clock at night. There were still a few hours left till then, but Harry didn't feel impatient. Instead, he was looking forward to seeing Michaela with his own eyes. Harry didn't know what he would do when he saw her. After waiting for a while, a person ran over with a packed lunchbox in his hand. He came to Harry's side. "Sir, this is the food I bought. Please eat some." He respectfully handed it over to Harry. Looking at the exceptionally exquisite lunchbox, Harry could imagine what kind of delicacies were inside after it was opened. Although it was a sign of his subordinate's loyalty, Harry still couldn't help frowning. June hurriedly said, "Sir, I ordered him to buy it for you. Are you not happy?" Harry couldn't help but sigh. "I'm now a poor worker. I'll attract too much attention if I eat this in public." June's expression immediately changed. "If you don't eat, I would be doing a horrible job of watching over you. Anyway, there's no one here now. Sir, why don't you just give it a try?" Harry pushed the lunchbox back to his subordinate. Then he said, "I understand your good intentions, but I really don't have an appetite right now. Take these back to those who are hungry. I'll get something myself when I want to eat." The person looked at June, and then looked at Harry. He left in a very difficult manner. Harry said to June again, "You two, you're going to attract some unwanted attention. You should go." Harry didn't have any other intentions. It was purely because June was too beautiful. She didn't look like she came from an ordinary family at all. However, June didn't feel good when she heard him. This was the first time Harry had told her to go away. She answered a little aggrievedly, lowered her head, and retreated to a hidden spot by the side. It was getting late. Harry had been sitting for a long time. He stood up to stretch his legs, but his stomach was growling. He was hungry this time, he thought with a bitter smile in his heart. He looked at the time. It was already time for Michaela to finish school, but it would take her about 10 minutes to go home from school. From afar, Harry could smell that there were people who had set up stalls at night at the entrance of the community. The reason these people set up their stalls at night was mainly because they wanted to do business with the high school students who came out of school at night in the community. For Michaela, although she had already had dinner at school in the afternoon, many students still had to have another meal when they returned home late after school. However, many parents were busy with work for the whole day and didn't have the energy to wait on them anymore. They would let their children buy food at the snack stand at the entrance. Harry was like an ordinary civilian. He held a paper bowl and ate the cold snack while waiting for Michaela to return from school. The subordinates who had disguised themselves nearby all widened their eyes in shock as they watched Harry very naturally blend into the crowd. In the eyes of other wealthy heirs, standing in this chaotic environment and eating this kind of unhygienic and terrible food was a nightmare. But in Harry's heart, he felt happy and free. After eating half a bowl of the cold food, Harry heard the sound of a bicycle's bell and the youthful laughter coming from afar. Groups of high school students wearing school uniforms rode their bikes home after school. When they passed by the entrance of the neighborhood, most of them stopped and gathered in groups of 3 to 5 to order food at various snack stalls. Harry stretched his neck and looked around, trying to find Michaela among the crowd. But after searching for a long time, there was no result. After a long while, the last group of students finally arrived. Borrowing the dim streetlights by the roadside, Harry recognized Michaela from a group of students who were riding their bikes quickly from afar. Michaela's mother was a stunning woman when she was young. She had even been a model in a magazine at one time. Michaela had even perfectly inherited all the advantages of both sides of her family. She was very beautiful and very smart. She didn't need to wear any makeup. The group of girls who had returned at the same time as her were completely suppressed and eclipsed. Michaela was like a phoenix, making people unconsciously make her the center of their attention. Although she looked like she was wearing an ordinary high school uniform with a simple ponytail, there was a kind of noble aura emitted from her that made people unconsciously respect her. At this moment, Harry no longer had the worry about her being a fake sister. Instead, there was a subconscious voice that kept telling him that this was his sister. Because from the moment he saw Michaela, Harry's heart had been inexplicably affected. This was a blood bond that he couldn't part with. Harry just stared blankly as Michaela gradually came to the entrance of the community and then stopped at a snack stall with her friends, waiting for the stall owner to prepare dinner for them. "I want to add more bacon, an egg, and a serving of pudding. Add more sugar," a chubby girl beside Michaela said. The stall owner smiled and replied, "Okay, the usual." The chubby girl looked at Michaela and said, "You didn't eat much in the afternoon either." Michaela looked at the various snacks on the stall and slowly shook her head. "No, I'll just eat a bowl of pudding," the fat girl said. "A bowl of pudding isn't enough to fill my stomach. Now that I'm so nervous about studying, it will take a lot of brain power, so I need to keep my energy up." Michaela smiled and said, "Although I'm thin, I'm still stronger than you." The fat girl said disdainfully, "What does a girl need strength for? You help those art students clean the art studio every day." Hearing this, Harry's heart involuntarily hurt. From June's investigation, Harry knew that although Michaela's family background wasn't good, it wasn't to the extent where she couldn't afford to eat. Michaela also needed to save money to buy some snacks at the stall. Usually she had to work for others in the school to earn some meager pay. This made Harry find it very hard to accept. She was only 17 years old and shouldn't have to bear the pressure of life. Harry couldn't help but walk up to the vendor and said, "Sir, make one more serving for her. I will pay you." Harry's sudden appearance shocked Michaela. When she heard that Harry wanted to pay for her food, she became even more confused. "Do we know each other? Why did you buy food for me?" Michaela asked in puzzlement. She sized up Harry and saw that he was dressed in very rustic clothing. He looked like a worker from another country. However, although he wasn't dressed well, he was very clean and good-looking. Facing the dim lights on the snack stand, it further highlighted the contours of Harry's face. For some reason, when Michaela saw Harry for the first time, she felt an inexplicable sense of familiarity that made Michaela feel very uncomfortable. She thought this man was a stranger whom she had never met before. Harry smiled. "I don't know you, but it's just a few dollars. You don't have to worry about it. Just think of it as me treating you as a friend." The fat little girl beside Michaela was stunned for a while when she saw Harry's handsome face. However, when she noticed that Harry was wearing cheap clothes, she was stunned. She distanced herself from Harry in disgust and pulled Michaela a few steps back at the same time. Harry couldn't help but complain in his heart. Harry didn't take the fat girl's actions to heart. He came here in disguise, so it was understandable that she disliked him. Michaela, he doesn't seem like a good person. I just found out that he has been secretly watching you. I'm afraid he might be a creep. The fat girl lay beside Michaela's ear and warned. Although her voice wasn't loud, Harry heard it all. It's fine if you dislike me, he thought. Michaela was very polite to Harry and said, Thank you, but we don't know each other, and I don't want to accept your offer. The stall owner couldn't help but ask when he saw them push the man away. Hey, do you still want the food? No, said Michaela. Yes, I want it, said Harry. Harry and Michaela spoke at the same time. The stall owner was helpless and said to Michaela, Kid, this little man doesn't seem like a bad guy. He is kind enough to buy you a meal, so why don't you just accept it? Harry smiled and nodded. That's right. It's just a small meal. It's not a big deal. After saying that, he gave the stall owner a grateful look. The people lining up to buy supper were also a little impatient. One after another, they said, That's right. Grab the food and get out of line. We're waiting. The surrounding people all joined in the commotion, causing Michaela's face to turn red. However, after the stall owner finished preparing the snacks Harry gave her, he still generously took them. Then the stall owner took out a few coins from his pocket, counted them, and put one back into his pocket. He handed the coin to Harry and said, I still have to give you the change. I'm sorry. Harry didn't hesitate anymore and took the chance and said, I was a little forward. I promise I'm a good guy and would like to treat you more in the future. Michaela was stunned. She didn't know what Harry meant by that. He was clearly a stranger whom she had met by chance. It was unknown whether she could meet him again in the future. Thinking that it might be that she had rejected his good intentions, it made her feel awkward. She smiled and nodded. All right, goodbye then. After saying that, she waved at Harry and rode a bicycle with her classmate toward their neighborhood. Harry looked at Michaela's back as she left. He was looking forward to seeing his sister for real. But in the next moment, Harry's eyes narrowed and his face became cold.